Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in here to Murder Church. Episode 2, Season 4, Phil Spector murder trial is going to continue here. Thanks for hanging out. Please go to X. Please share that out over on Twitter. I'd really appreciate it. It really helps me out. And share this out with your socials as well, whether that's Facebook or whatever. Really appreciate it. Again, week 2 about to come at you right now. And yeah, we have a long day of some more defense opening statements from Phil Spector's defense team. And coming at you. Thanks for coming. Yo, what is up, everybody? Thanks for coming in here. Murder Church is on the air for episode 2, week 2, episode 2, season 4 of this Phil Spector trial happening right now. Thanks for coming in here. Really appreciate it. Let me fix this light a little bit right here. Make sure that's right. What's up, everybody? Thanks for coming in here. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we're about to jump right in again. We left off last week. We've heard the first part of the defense doing their openings. We're about to see the second part of his defense attorney, and then we're going to go into a third part before we even get to the first witness here. So hopefully we'll get there. We'll see. These are some long opening statements also. Let me get the Botrix chat in here. Maybe it needs a kick in the butt to wake up. Hopefully here. Might have to go over here. But yeah, please hit that like, share this out, let people know that you're hanging out here with Publicly Buzzed today. I really appreciate it, guys. Just looking in here real quick. Might have to turn that off. Let me do that. Let me do that. Here we go. I'll see if that works. Boom. But yeah, the lady murdered was a B movie star, at least at this time in her life was a B movie star, Lana Clarkson, who you see up on the screen right now. Beautiful lady. Was working a regular job this time, a little bit down on her luck, wasn't catching the roles like she was, and on this fateful night, she ran into Phil Spector, who was a music genius mogul, worked with the Beatles. We've been talking about it for a couple of weeks, getting everybody hyped up on it. Absolute insane person as well. Everyone probably has been seeing all the posts about the wigs. This man is just, I was expecting different days in the trial. We will see different wigs even. So he's very eccentric. But on this fateful night when they ended up in each other's company and he took her back to his castle, that's what he calls his mansion, she ended up with a gunshot through the mouth, which severed her spine and killed her. And he says that she did it to himself. And the initial 911 call is his driver basically saying, my boss has killed this lady. He's holding the gun, and he says he did. So it's an interesting case, to say the least. So we're going to jump right in here, guys. Again, thank you so much. Let me see who's hanging out this morning, though, real quick. First and foremost. And also let me get this in here so we can chat. So I can pop your thoughts up on the screen, because that's part of the fun here. I don't know why Botrix isn't woken up yet, but what's up, everybody? Joanne coming through here. Dizzy in the house. Lil Love in the house. Defense Nerdy Meow in the house. I'm a little, where's the pickles? I'm a little messed up. Let me fix that too. Bring that down just a little bit. I'm a little messed up this morning myself. I had a weird night. Cassie is an hour away. She's at her mom's house. Her mom went out of town to do some Mother's Day stuff, to enjoy Mother's Day, but they left their dog. So Cassie went to, make sure the dog was good overnight. So Gypsy's been all out of sorts because she isn't home. So that's why I was a little bit late this morning trying to get Gypsy sorted out. So, and I'll probably in a minute, once I get this started, run up and get some coffee, because I didn't even have time to do that yet. So, yeah. But yeah. Gypsy's good, Donna. Gypsy's doing good right now. Knock on wood. Everyone knock on wood. I'm trying to get her meds leveled out to where she is good. And yeah, new merch. Check out that new merch, PubliclyBuzzed.com. If you haven't, I'll put that in the chat also. Yeah, we have some new merch that is by Mandy. Mandy killed it. She did an amazing job. Please go check that out. Ronnie in the house. Gabby in the house. Unbronzed Aussie Laura in the house. Welcome in here. See some new names also. Really appreciate it, guys. We're going to start right now. We're going to rock and roll. We're going to jump in here. See Amber in the house also. Thank you for coming through here. And yeah, make sure you're following on X, Publicly Buzzed on X. That's the only one that even really fucking matters. Facebook is complete fucking trash. They share nothing. They give no fucks about true crime whatsoever. And then I put a link tree up there as well. That's got all the socials in it. So yeah, let's rock and roll, guys. Thank y'all so much for hanging and banging. Let's rock. I think we're here. God. No, that was the first one. Hold on. My bad. That was the first one we did listen to. We're on part 2. Here. The defense continues their opening statement.
Yeah, very briefly, Your Honor.
And the judge looks like Bruce Willis, oddly. He oddly looks like Bruce Willis.
The attorney's, Mr. Rick Ocampo for the District Attorney's Office. The court may recall that at one point in time, the prosecution demanded that some items that were collected by Dr. Henry Lee in the days after this particular tragedy occurred be turned over to them. They were turned over some months ago, maybe 6 months ago, after a lot of back and forth and so forth. And I've been asking them to get re-access to them so we could do some testing. The prosecution has taken the position that since it came from the scene of where the decedent died, it's their evidence, we can't destroy it. They wanted it, they got it. We now want to do some independent testing on it. And we're having trouble getting it back. We'd like a court order signed that we'd be able to get that and do some testing. Apparently they've looked at it. They're not going to do any DNA testing. We want to do a quick DNA test to confirm that it is what it purports to be, and that's some blood that emanated from the decedent here, Miss Lana Clarkson. But they're resisting that at this point, so we want to get it going.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson.
Your Honor, to put a little bit of context on this, this is an item of evidence, or several items of evidence, that we've been asking for from Dr. Lee, and it's been the subject of litigation for some, at least 3 years. The defense resisted and resisted and resisted turning those things over to us. They put us off, et cetera, et cetera. We got several court orders. Finally, the court,
my bad. Let me turn up the
specifically said, if you have evidence in your possession that is from the crime scene, it belongs to the prosecution. That is their evidence. Turn it over. We finally got it, I think, in October, either October or November of last year. We've had it for a couple of months. However, on Friday, we have all, as a preface, we've also been asking for photographs and reports from the defense experts that we think are connected in some way to this particular item of evidence. This item of evidence happens to be a blood stain, or what purports to be a blood stain collected by Dr. Henry Lee. We've been asking for Dr. Henry Lee's reports, his raw notes, and any photographs.
We can't even get through the opening statements, folks. We can't even get through the opening statements. We're in week 2 of the opening statements.
This evidence for at least 2 years. We've got nothing until just before we started trial in this case. We got some reports, and then we got some raw notes. On
and
Friday,
happy Mother's Day. Hold on. Yeah, happy Mother's Day. Yes, to all the ladies and all the mothers out there, have an absolutely amazing day. Cannot forget that. Persephone, thank you.
finally, after years of requesting it,
Gotta go
we got
visit
55
my mother
photographs
today as well.
reportedly taken by Dr. Lee at the crime scene. Those photographs, at least in part, give context to that blood evidence that we have now gotten. We've had since Friday to compare and contrast what we received physically from Dr. Lee and the photographs that we finally got, which is a blatant discovery violation. Dr. Lee's been on their witness list from day one, and he's been an expert who's been referred to in the press and by the defense teams, not just this team, but the teams that were precursors to this team since day one as well. We simply haven't had time to do any real testing of this evidence. We also believe that there's analysis that needs to take place outside of and beforehand any consumptive DNA testing takes place. We simply can't turn it over at this point and have it destroyed. There's too much that we need to do with it at this point. And it also, not to put too fine a point on it, it also belongs to us. So that's our position at this point.
Thank you.
Just to put it in further context, as the court knows, the law enforcement authorities, probably 30 or 40 of them were at the scene for well over 24 hours, close to 48 hours, and they thoroughly documented the scene on their own photographs. Dr. Lee came in afterwards, took some pictures of a few things. He knew nothing about the issues in the case at the time, or very little. They've had Dr. Lee's reports. They wanted better copies of his notes. We gave those to them.
And I see Viv, and she has made me remember I forgot the bells. I'm all out of sorts this morning, guys. Got all out of sorts because everything is so fucking was weird last night. Hold on. We got to start this off with the church bells. Got to start Murder Church off correctly, my friends, is what we have to do. Get the chat up here rolling. We are doing it. Viv, thank you for coming in here. I really appreciate it.
Recently, I asked them if they wanted to do DNA testing, that would be fine. We would just sit back and wait for their results. But they've represented to me that they're choosing not to do DNA testing, that they just wanted to look at this little blood microscopically, which they've already done. We haven't seen any reports yet, but it's been told that they've already looked at it microscopically. They do have the pictures. They know what they are. I've talked extensively with Mr. Ocampo and explained to him what these pictures were, because we kind of went through them and correlated them to Dr. Lee's notes. And I said, look, if you're not going to do anything more with it, give it to us so we can get it in the hopper to get this tested and get the result in a timely manner. Or let's split the sample. There's enough DNA in this sample for probably 5 different DNA tests, confirmatory or otherwise. We simply want to confirm the fact that this is biological material from Lana Clarkson, and so that when we put on our case, we can prepare for it. They've already looked at this microscopically. If they want to do some DNA test, well, then let's get that done. And then we'll get a split of the sample.
One thing I want to do real quick, I apologize. Well, I also hear that in the background here.
If they want to do some...
Right there. I knew something was happening. Hold on 1 second. I apologize. I just want to get this off the screen. It is distracting me. You guys couldn't see it, but I could.
There shouldn't be an issue, but what they're saying is we want to look at it more. They've already looked at it. What more is there to do? There's nothing additional that they need to do at this point.
You haven't responded to why you turned it over so late.
The blood itself?
You heard what Mr. Jackson said. Is he right or is he wrong?
Yeah, it was turned over 4 or 5 months ago, and I don't know what the reason why. I know there was some litigation. There was some contention by former counsel Leslie Evertson that this wasn't evidence related to the crime, or that they didn't have a right to it. The court ruled against us on that. We turned it over. They took the position that you can't destroy this. You're tampering with evidence. So we never tested it.
You can't do consumptive testing unless the district attorney, in essence, it is their evidence, and the case law says that, unless they basically have concluded all tests on it, you don't have a right to do consumptive testing on the only example. When we have splits and something like that, then it's fine to go ahead and do whatever you want to do, but when there's only one example, the law is very clear that you cannot do consumptive testing without the district attorney's consent, or the fact that they're present when you do the consumptive testing and have their experts present. You don't have a right to consume an entire exhibit unless the prosecution is finished with it.
We're not asking to consume the entire exhibit. We're asking to do a DNA test on a portion of the exhibit. We want to get the exhibit to do that testing. And there's enough to do many tests. In fact, I would just prefer that they test it DNA-wise. That way we wouldn't even have to worry about this issue. But they're making a choice not to do that. They've looked at it microscopically. That's all they can really do to do any testing. Dr. Lee did a presumptive blood test on it when he collected it. That's why he collected it. We just want to further characterize the biological origin of this material. They've had it now for 4 or 5 months. I was surprised they didn't test it, frankly, but they didn't. We're here. We would like to have a portion of it to do some testing so that we can, put it in our trial evidence presentation to the jury. Simply stated.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, can the evidence be split?
Your Honor, at this point, the power of and Mr. Plord, I think, is arguing from a point of he doesn't know what it is that we want to do. I don't want to say the word ignorance. He simply doesn't know what
You won't say it even though you just did.
I won't say it even though it just came out of my mouth.
I understand.
My point is, and I mean no disrespect to Mr. Plord, he simply doesn't know what our experts want to do with that particular piece of evidence. Now that we have certain photographs, the evidence is now put in context.
Alan Jackson has a way of words.
A dried sample of blood packaged by Dr. Henry Lee. That dried blood, the value of it, at least partially the value of it, is in its structure, how it's made up. It's cracked, broken, and Dr. Harold can, at least in part, do some analysis. Now that she has photographs, these photographs that you're looking at now that we just got on Friday.
And that's what I asked you, Mr. Port. Let me interrupt. Where were the photographs?
I'm not going to call him ignorant, but I'm going to use the word out loud in open court.
Why did they come in on Friday?
Well, there were, as I understand, there was some photocopies.
That's what I'm thinking
that
too. I'm guessing that they're not allowing them to see all this.
were done, and then we had to get them from Dr. Lee. I don't know why there was a delay in getting them. We got them late, and we gave them to them last week. And my thinking is that they can look at it. I thought they were done with it. What more do they need to do? Maybe I know pretty much what they're doing. I can get a pretty good sense of that based upon my forensic background. But this particular state, if you look here, this is what we're talking about that was collected. That if you can visualize a spot of blood, even a smaller one than that, you can get multiple tests out of it. There's no real question about that. If they need to do something else, get it done. Let's get it split. Let's get it in the testing chain, and let's get it done. I think for some reason, they're just not moving very quickly on it, and I'm just not understanding the reason for that. That's why I have to raise it to the court. I tried to work this out informally. It's just not working. We are in trial. Whatever the case may be, the pictures got turned over late. They wanted better copies of Dr. Lee's notes. We expeditiously gave them a better copy. Let's go forward.
Okay.
And one of the things I should bring up,
I really don't think I need to hear anymore. I mean, I'm not trying to shut you off, Mr. Jackson, but I'm about to rule in your favor if you'd like to change my mind. Okay. Thank you.
That says it all.
All right. The prosecution has set forth more than a reasonable justification for still working with the evidence, and plus which, with all due respect, the defense comes in with somewhat unclean hands given the photographs that were turned over extremely late, which Mr. Jackson has indicated he is using in conjunction with the physical evidence to do their analysis. So you really don't have a real firm leg to stand on. As long as it's turned over to you in a reasonable time, and we're going to be in trial for a long time, that you can do adequate testing and be prepared. That's my concern. The prosecution is ordered to do that.
Yes,
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate the court's
All right. Are we ready for the jury?
We are.
All right.
I don't believe so, Judge, but there's one other issue that
Okay.
I think we need to bring to the court's attention.
All right.
It was brought to my attention this morning by Mr. Brunon. He was not here. He didn't join us for most of, or maybe any of the voir dire process. As it turns out, I am now told that Mr. Brunon may know one of the sitting jurors, or know of that sitting juror. So I'll let him expound.
Tell me.
Your Honor, yesterday when I came in, I noticed that an individual I thought was an alternate, but I'm informed the way the jury is configured, maybe a member of the panel, is someone that used to work for an office services firm for the firm where I have an office.
Okay.
That's kind of convoluted.
I understand.
I know his first name. At one time I did know his last name. I can't recall it at the moment. I've never had any substantive conversations with him. Hi, goodbye. Give me some copies. But I asked our folks if his acquaintance with me came up, and no one could recall that it did. So I called Mr. Jackson this morning, informed him, and told him we ought to inform the court and see how you want to handle it.
Thank you very much. What I'll do is, can you point to the seat number? We'll bring the juror out and we'll do a little inquiry.
It was kind of obscured from where I was, but I think he's in the rear seat on the far left.
All right, you know what? We can actually do it with the entire jury present. It doesn't make a difference. Either he's going to know Mr. Brunon, it's going to affect him, or it's not. It's no different than voir dire as far as I'm concerned.
It's up to the court.
We'll just bring out the jury. Before we do, you had indicated last night you might have some P's and A's for me?
Yes, Your Honor. We didn't fax it because we're not revisiting that issue.
Okay, and thank you very much.
I didn't want to just...
Let me thank you very much, and Mr. Brunon, stick around at least for a little while. There is an excellent case. There's more than some. I'm more than ever, judges make evidentiary rulings on the fly. And then you go back and you hope that your knowledge of the evidence code is sufficient. That's why I say I'm always happy to revisit a ruling. But my research attorney found a superb case which supported my conclusions, which is, it's an old case, but it's a good case. People versus Cruz at 264 Calop 2nd 350, which ends up answering each and every response the defense made. They're all contained in that case.
Can I have the site again, please?
Sure. It's 264 Calop 2nd 350. It was written, or at least concurred in, by Justice Kaus before he became the bigger Justice Kaus on the Supreme Court. He was back on the 2nd District, and a good friend of mine.
So it's an oldie but a goodie.
It is. It was written by Justice Kaus. Okay? So if you want to take a look at it.
I will. And the reason that I appreciate the indulgence of the court was that I didn't know
It's okay.
they weren't going to use it. So I was trying to find out why they kept mentioning there were different statements, different versions, different stories.
No problem.
And then when it came to crunch time, if you will, we approached the bench, so I just didn't expect it.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
The good news and bad news. The good news is I did supply some plastic cups for you to drink water with.
Yes,
the
that's-
bad news is you'll be billed at the end of the trial. All right. Let's bring out the jurors.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. And Mr. Brunon, if you can indicate, the seat numbers are 1 through 9 across the top, and those are the regular juror members, and it's 10 through 12 from my right to left in the bottom. So if you can just give me a seat number when they get seated. Okay, thank you. All right, the jurors and the alternates are now present. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin with the opening statement, or continue with the opening statement, an issue has arisen which we just need to resolve. Mr. Brunon, what seat number?
Number 9.
All right, juror number 9. The gentleman that's standing facing you, do you know him?
Yes,
Okay. All right, Mr. Brunon is part of the defense team. He has not been here during the entire trial, and he'll be here, I guess, at times you'll be here and times you won't. Is that all right? Could you tell me about how you know him?
I work for a law firm. I used to work for a law firm in West LA. What is it? Jenkins and Gilchrist?
I couldn't hear.
Jenkins and Gilchrist, law firm in West LA. And they were a subtenant of the company I worked for.
I'm sorry, I can't hear. And they were,
A subtenant?
Okay. Is there anything about knowing, how close was your relationship with Mr. Brunon?
He had an office there.
Just casual, formal? I mean, how would you?
Well, if he needed anything, he would call the office manager. She would call me. We'd take care of it.
Okay. Is there anything about that relationship that in any way causes you concern in your ability to be fair to both sides in this case?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Does either side wish to follow up with any additional questions?
No. Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further.
No, Your Honor.
Does anybody wish to approach the bench?
No, Your Honor.
No, sir.
No, thank you, Your Honor.
We're good. Thank you. Thank you for revealing that, Mr. Brunon. We appreciate it. All right. You may proceed.
It please the court, Your Honor. Good morning and good morning. I started yesterday with some thoughts in what I thought the evidence would show you. I won't be very long this morning, but I did want to revisit and also revisit some other matters, and also mention some new matters, and hopefully I did not mention them yesterday. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the concepts that I mentioned was that the detectives and the Alhambra Police Department, when they responded to Philip's home, had what I called murder on their mind. And as a result of, the evidence will show, as a result of murder on their mind, they interviewed and acted in such a way that anything that was consistent, the evidence will show, with their preconceived notions and theories, they embraced. And anything that was not consistent or inconsistent with that murder on their mind, they ignored. You'll hear from the evidence that the detectives worked very hard and interviewed, by last count, you'll hear it from the evidence, well over 150 or 60 civilians from the time of February 303 to the time charges were filed, November 2103, to the time that they presented this matter to a grand jury in September 04. And you'll hear from the evidence that these devoted detectives who had murder on their mind spoke to any and everybody who had any thought whatsoever with regard to Philip. And they even went to the trouble of taping the interviews. And they even went to the trouble of taping the interviews of the policemen who responded to the castle, to his home. And the evidence will show that's the case here. And the evidence will show that's why they acted the way they did when they responded to the castle. The evidence will show, as I said yesterday, I alluded to the fact that when they came to the castle, they had spoken to De Souza. And according to the evidence, they were informed by De Souza that there was nobody home other than Philip and the decedent. So after being beckoned in, invited in, the police department, I don't personally, and no need to fault them, but you'll hear from the evidence that they stormed the castle. And you'll see from the evidence that what they had to do, what they did do when they brought Philip out of his home was unnecessary. 5, 6, 7 policemen to bring a man out of his home who's 5'4", 135 pounds, unarmed, and a decedent in his home, you'll see from the evidence, was unnecessary. The use of the stun gun, the dangerous taser gun, was completely unnecessary. The tackling, completely unnecessary. The hog tying, the handcuffing, completely unnecessary. And just keep that as a backdrop, so when you hear the phrase, murder on their mind, you'll understand what the evidence will mean in this case. I'm not upbraiding the policemen, but you'll see that all they needed to do was, the evidence will show, Philip, we want you to come with us. Would you come with us? Instead of the tackling, the tasering, and the tying, and the sitting on him, and all of that. Why that's relevant, the evidence will show, is the mindset of the police. And I'm not in any way denigrating or saying anything in derogation of the department. I'm not saying anything in derogation, and the evidence will back me up, that they were not being careful. Of course they were being careful. You'll also hear from the evidence that De Souza, who claimed to run down to the end of the driveway so he could see the address of the home, you'll understand and appreciate from the evidence that the home of Philip in Alhambra is a landmark. And you'll understand and appreciate from the evidence, you'll hear testimony that the police department in Alhambra know of it as the castle. So if they were called, and they were called, and the evidence will show they were called, all they needed to be told was, I'm here at the castle, please come. This is to the Alhambra Police Department. You'll also appreciate and understand the importance of the witness de Souza, and you'll see from the evidence what really happened with him. You'll see from the evidence that during the interview I broached with you with Detectives Fournier and Tomlin, the very first formal interview following the earlier interview with Detective Panetta, with the murder on their mindset, they were very careful to ask him what it is he claimed he heard. And during the interview, you'll hear from the evidence the detective saying, are you sure? Now, let's carefully...
We back, baby!
Carefully hear this. And this is
Got
on
some coffee.
February 3 of 03. And his response was, well, I'm not, it's my English, you know. It's my English, you know. Now, that's over 4 years ago. But the evidence will show that he was considered their fair-haired boy. They treated him that way. So the evidence will show that they cosseted him. And he looked at them, the evidence will show, as handlers of him. And he identified with them. I'm not saying the evidence will show that he is an evildoer, but the evidence will show that there was no confession made. Mr. Jackson's comment and affirmation, there was a confession made, it's not evidence. There was no confession made to him. He's not a father confessor. He was a substitute driver who was asleep at the time that the shot rang out. Mr. Jackson didn't even mention the fountain being on. You'll hear that there was all kinds of background noise during that period of time. There's no question the shot rang out. But there was no confession, I submit to you.
I can't wait till we start getting the change in wigs once he comes in with a different one every day. 'Cause this is a different day, and he came back with the same, Beatles-style haircut that he was rocking the previous day. Change it up, Phil!
And the evidence will not show you a confession. It will show you that if a statement was made after a panic and a shock, the evidence will show, you'll consider it in the context in which it was made. And you'll consider it, if you will, with most respectfully, what they did as a result of the statement. What the detectives did. How they performed their function with murder on their mind. One of the things I wanted to mention yesterday was the theory that the prosecutions put forth in their opening statement. The decedent, and they've left you with the impression there was some kind of struggle or difficulty, the evidence they said will show. The decedent was 5'11" and over 6 feet tall in high heels, in heels. And Philip is 5'4" and 135 pounds. As judges of the fact, and the facts in this case, you'll hear evidence of the differential in size. You'll use it for what you feel it's warranted for. You'll also hear evidence of the decedent and whether she was drinking, whether she was taking painkillers or other pills. And you'll decide from the evidence what effect, if any, that had on her as a labile individual who's affected by alcohol and pills. You'll decide from the evidence what, if any, effect it had on her judgment. You'll decide from the evidence what, if any, effect it may have had on her being somewhat reckless. You'll see. you'll judge it. You'll have an open mind. You'll see what, if any, effect any of this had on what happened at 5 a.m. February 3 of '03. The evidence will lead you to what happened. You'll even keep in mind from the evidence where the bottle of tequila came from. Maybe a query in this case. The evidence will demonstrate that.
This was John Gotti's
Last,
attorney.
the other item, I shouldn't say the last, the other item I wanted to mention was the Carlisle Hotel incident. You'll hear from the evidence in this case that one of the incident with gun women occurred, according to Mr. Jackson, which is not evidence, occurred at the Carlisle Hotel, and he put up a police call. Somebody responded, or at least a call was made, and there was a response to the Carlisle Hotel. You'll see from the evidence in New York, unlike California, if you have a gun in a hotel without a permit, they don't look to a woman to ask you to come with them. Meaning, if you have a gun, you're going to be arrested when they respond to a hotel in New York City. You're not permitted to carry a gun unless you have a carry permit. You'll hear evidence to that effect. So the woman, Stephanie Jennings, has no say, you'll hear from the evidence, in whether or not Mr. Spector had a gun or was charged with carrying a gun. He didn't and he wasn't. He didn't and he wasn't. You'll hear from her that she was given taxi fare or train fare back to Philadelphia after a ruckus that occurred because the people at the hotel, and I'm not being in any way pejorative here, thought she was a prostitute because of all the ruckus. Of course, she is not, but that's what they thought, and that's what will be put forth to you as evidence in this case. That's why she left the hotel. That's why she was given train fare from the hotel. And of course, you'll also hear that the suite and the rooms were all paid for by Philip. You'll also hear evidence in this case with regard to Stephanie Jennings, like the other three women they mentioned. They continued to see Philip. After this incident, they accompanied Philip to affairs and other things, and they stayed at the Carlisle, and she did, for a week when Philip wasn't even there. So I was trying to say yesterday, and I reiterate today, that bear in mind...
I bring the motherfucking ruckus! I bring the motherfucking ruckus!
When you hear the evidence in this case from these women, as judges of the fact, I implore you to keep in mind motive, incentive, bias, and purpose. With Stephanie Jennings, you'll hear that evidence that after February 3 of '03, in this world of immediate access, she took out photographs she had that she collected.
You think it's
Philip,
immediate then?
and
Lord.
she spoke to a reporter from the National Enquirer. And you'll hear evidence of what kind of newspaper that is. And you'll hear from the evidence that she sold her story, she sold her tall tale, and what they really wanted was a photograph of her and Philip, and she gave it to him. So please keep all of that in mind when you consider hearing from her or from any other incident with gun women who are not witnesses in this case. Also bear in mind, De Souza is not a witness to what happened at 0500 inside Philip's home. He's not a witness to it. Bear in mind that De Souza will indicate to you, and the evidence will show that he served in the Brazilian army for 8 or 9 years. Nothing wrong with that. You have to have respect for that. But as soon as he saw a woman in distress, according to what Mr. Jackson said. He ran away. Fully familiar with guns, fully familiar with military lifestyle. He ran away. You'll hear from the evidence he himself said Philip was not a violent person, but he did have an argument with him a week or two before. But consider that in judging credibility, perceptibility, availability, and truthfulness.
Who is coughing?
Keep that in mind as well. One of the other incident with gun women that Mr. Jackson mentioned was a Dorothy Melvin. Bear in mind that the evidence will show that she told the authorities, and don't forget all of these people came in after February 3 of 03. All of these people got together with the detectives after February 3 of 03 to talk about incidents that went back to 1987, to talk about incidents that went back to 1991, to talk about incidents that occurred in 1993, to talk about incidents that occurred in 1994. This is all after 2003. And as I said yesterday, none of them prosecuted Philip. None of them sued him civilly. And all of them saw him afterwards. And none of them ever sought any medical attention. Dorothy Melvin herself, you'll hear evidence in this case, claimed when she wanted to get her pocketbook because of the precious passport belonging to Joan Rivers, her boss, and her, that she was hit twice in the head with a handgun. Not what Mr. Jackson said in his opening statement, which is not evidence, that she was slapped by Philip's hand. She said she was smacked twice in the head with a handgun. And so you'd expect that the evidence will show that detectives, a policeman from Pasadena that she called,
That's pure vodka.
would have
He's going to hit that like a shot.
seen some difficulty with her head. You'll hear evidence that, and you'll use your common sense, that if you're hit twice in the head with a handgun, there's bruising, bleeding, and injury. And you'll hear from the evidence in this case that there was no bruising, bleeding, or injury, and there was no acceptance of any medical aid or needed in this case. In this incident, I should say, in this incident that is used in this case, the evidence will show. The evidence will further show that as far as this incident, the policeman who responded didn't arrest Philip. They themselves gave the pocketbook to Miss Melvin. They saw a shotgun, they left it in the house, and they have no recollection, at least as far as we know the evidence will show, about her indicating she was hit in the head twice with a gun. No injury, no medical attention, no police recollection, because it's not so. Keep in mind, as triers of the facts, that the case
Fix the sound. Hold on. Happened early today.
scripted, choreographed, and put together. I'm not talking about anything unethical or illegal. It can be scripted, rehearsed, choreographed, and put together. So it looks like, the evidence will show, that there's some relationship between relationships that Philip had in his life that ended on a sour note and the death of the decedent. If the decedent, the evidence will show, did not fool with the gun and cause her own death, you wouldn't know anything about Miss Melvin, Miss Jennings, Miss Ogden, or any of the others, and the last as well. You wouldn't know anything about them. It didn't say anything about them, other than the evidence that you'll hear.
Yeah, he feels like a mob attorney. So I wonder if you
Keep
can
in
find.
mind,
I think
it's
the John
trials of
Gotti
the
one's
fact
on Court
This
TV
is not
also,
a spectacle or an event, even though it's so well covered. It's well covered, the evidence will show, because of the achievements by Philip.
Bruce Cutler.
Keep in mind as well, the evidence will show that according to Mr. Jackson, there was some kind of attempt by Philip to clean things up and move things. Bear in mind the shock effect when you saw those photographs. Bear in mind the shock effect and what it may have. Bear in mind when Mr. Jackson said Philip was upstairs, he took off his white jacket. Bear in mind the evidence will show, and you will see, he wasn't hiding anything. He wasn't hiding his white jacket. As a matter of fact, when they took him after they knocked him down and tasered him and handcuffed him and sat on him and everything else.
So we all listened to the 911 call, and we've also heard how this man was acting once the police actually showed up there.
They took him down to
Two different
Alhambra,
stories.
and Philip asked,
I can only imagine
"May I
how
have
erratic
my
this
white
man
jacket?
was.
There are phone numbers in there. I want to call people if you're going to charge me." So he wasn't looking to hide the white jacket. He was the person who asked for the white jacket. Bear in mind the evidence will show, even though it's presented in a scripted, choreographed, practiced fashion, that these incidents with women he knew and had relationships with was not a pattern. They were isolated, the evidence will show, isolated spats over the course of years, over the course of 20 years. So when you cherry pick, when you have murder on your mind and you just pull out anything negative, you got something negative to say about Philip, you'll hear the evidence in this case. Come on with us. Did so much, he even went to the hospital where his son was sick. He lost his son. Terrible tragedy. He lost his son. Son was almost the same age he was.
Objection, Your Honor.
He
This
lost
is
his
argument.
father.
The objection is sustained. Please refrain from arguing the case.
Consider the evidence that
I'm
day.
surprised he just didn't keep rolling. The first time, objections would just slide off this dude's back. He'd just keep on moving. I think he would actually adjust in real time, actually, which is kind of impressive.
The detectives, the
Like, there was no pause. He just kept...
police who had murder on their mind and had a mindset
He loves that.
went everywhere.
My
and
opening statement
anywhere
is called Murder on My Mind.
to speak to anyone, crackpot or not, about Philip. And
You're so
you'll hear
freaking cool.
evidence
Dan
of
ordered
that.
some. I'm going to order some also. Like,
Anybody that saw him in a hotel,
Those are sweet.
anybody that saw him in a restaurant, tell us, what was he doing? Who was he with? This event, this tragic event that caused the death of a decedent, was not the fault of Philip, but it became a cause.
Objection, this is argument.
I'm going to overrule that. You may proceed.
From the evidence, it became a cause celeb for the authorities because of who he was. That's what this is all about. All these nice people here from all over the world. You'll see that from the evidence. You'll see the kind of duplication and quadruplication that the detectives did in this case. Interviewed people on the telephone, taped their interviews, saw them in person, taped their interviews. They mentioned Kathy Sullivan, Mr. Jackson did. Yesterday in his opening, which is not evidence. They interviewed her, they taped her. The evidence will show that they were together, they were friends, they had a platonic relationship. There was no dismissal of her in the House of Blues. She was tired, she went home. See, the evidence will show you she was tired, she went home, and the prosecution in his opening statement made it seem like she was dismissed. If Philip was angry, she wouldn't have a drink. Evidence will also show drinks were ordered, Diet Cokes were ordered, and we don't know how much liquor was consumed
Liquor. Liquor drink. We know what's up with the liquor drink around these parts, huh?
I'm sober enough to know what I'm doing, and I'm drunk enough
Mr. Jim
to
Leahy,
really enjoy
thank you, sir.
doing it.
We love you.
To have a drink
Rest in
late
peace.
at night. It's not a crime to order food late at night. It's not a crime, you'll see from the evidence, to go out with your high school friend at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night. It's not a crime, you'll see from the evidence, to take out a friend who works at the grill. Those things are not crimes. When a man is closed off his personal life, his non-music life, you'll see from the evidence there are times when the limelight burns. And there are times when the limelight is lonely. It's lonely. You've done so much, it's lonely.
Objection, Your Honor. This is
You'll
argument.
see that from the evidence.
Excuse me, the objection is sustained. Again, you are delving into argument.
You'll see from the evidence will show that when you reach a certain pinnacle,
Objection, Your Honor. This is argument.
The
as well.
objection is sustained. Just saying the evidence will show when it's still argument is still objectionable. The objection
I'll
is
move forward.
sustained. All right, thank you.
so much.
Yeah, welcome in, everybody. Thanks for coming in this morning. I appreciate it. Hit the old like button if you haven't.
But certainly the evidence will show that it's not a crime to enjoy company of another.
Objection, Your Honor. This is still argument.
Again, it is.
Son of a bitch!
Ladies and gentlemen, the
I wish my coffee would cool
evidence will show, and as I indicated to you in my voir dire and earlier in my opening statement, our evidence will show through an example of a Dr. Lee and other criminalists, forensic pathologists, blood spatter experts, ballistics experts, and all the rest. Philip's home was not a crime scene. From the evidence, you'll see no matter how many police labels they put up, no matter how many tags and identification cards they put up to make it seem like a crime scene, you'll hear from our experts it was a death scene, not a crime scene. You'll also hear that in the home where Philip lived, there was a starter's pistol, which resembled the gun that took the life of the decedent. That was a gun found on the same lower floor where the decedent was. You'll see from the evidence the resemblance between the starter's pistol and the gun that took her life. Whatever
Cameraman's like, "Slow down, sir."
You want to give that, you give that. Those were the only two guns found at the lower level where the decedent was. The gun that she used to kill herself and the starter's pistol encased in a holster like the one Mr. Jackson showed you on the overhead Elmo here. Or St. Elmo, I guess it's called. So keep in mind, alcohol, painkillers, a starter's pistol that doesn't hurt, deadly gun that can kill, almost look exactly alike. Keep in mind the evidence will show a big, strong woman, a take-charge woman, an assertive woman. It's not beyond the pale. In fact, it's consistent with the evidence that she felt comfortable there in Philip's home. And whatever she was doing, whatever she was consuming, however she felt, she took her life.
She had not even taken her purse off. Her purse was still on her shoulder. And some testimony last week from Alan Jackson talking about some past women that he had some issues with. maybe some abuse, allegedly. You know, it seemed like, I don't know. She hadn't even gotten comfortable yet. She had shown up. They got there like 3 in the morning, about 5 in the morning. So that's a long time too. It's 2 hours. So maybe she did get comfortable and she was leaving. Maybe she was trying to leave. And that's why she had the purse strapped back on in those 2 hours.
Unfortunately. Much too young. Bear in mind, the evidence will show, the believable evidence will show. Philip harbored no malice to the decedent. He had just met her. Bear in mind, the evidence will show there was no dispute. As a matter of fact, they were in the back of the car going to the castle. She going with Philip on her own volition. She watching a old movie with James Cagney, which was ironic almost. Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye. That was the movie she was watching. Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye. How prophetic. And keep in mind, the evidence will show again, unlike the women coming in here with tears and tall tales and stories, Philip never knew this woman. He had no intent to hurt this woman.
Objection, that's argument.
The evidence will show that.
I'm going to allow that with that proviso. That's fine. You may proceed.
The evidence will show he had no motive to hurt this woman. He harbored no malice towards this woman. Most importantly, the evidence is going to show conclusively that the gun was held by the decedent when it fired. The evidence is going to show, I don't want to touch this because the evidence is going to show that the decedent, according to the evidence, was seated. The gun was in her mouth, put there by her. No broken teeth in. Everything was out. Everything was out. There was no evidence that a gun was forced in her mouth. There were no broken teeth in. That's not so. It's not consistent with the evidence.
He's going to attack
there
the
was
jury.
the evidence will show nobody forced a gun.
You listen to me! You listen to me! No one forced this! Can you hear me? He's grabbing the jurors by their shirt collars. Can you hear me? Do you see me? No one forced this! You, ma'am! Can you hear me clearly?
Show this was not a pistol, Mr. Jackson. The evidence will show there's a major difference between a pistol and a revolver. Pistol is semi-automatic. A revolver is not. The evidence will show that to shoot a revolver, you press the hammer back and you can pull the trigger, and you don't need as much pressure as you do if the hammer is pulled back. I'm not a ballistics expert, but that's what the evidence will show. The evidence will show she had a broken nail, the decedent, consistent with self-inflicted gunshot wounds. What's consistent with self-inflicted gunshot wounds is reasonable doubt. So there is no evidence of any intent to put someone in danger. There's no evidence of any intent to hurt, harm a woman. 5 words, according to the prosecutor. I think I killed somebody. I think somebody is killed, or nothing. Or nothing. You'll see from the evidence. You'll decide what it means, if anything. If it was heard, by whom, what state he was in. Philip says through me every day, in addition to the presumption of innocence,
Objection, Your Honor. This sounds like this.
I don't know. I have to hear the whole statement. It's premature.
Philip says through me every day, in addition to the presumption of innocence in which he is swathed, in which he is bandaged, I'm not guilty.
Objection. This is our...
The objection is sustained.
I did not fire that gun.
Objection.
The objection is sustained. The jury is admonished, as it has been before, to disregard anything I sustain an objection to.
The evidence will show you Philip did not shoot the decedent.
I'll wake you up.
The scientific evidence is a witness in the home. There were no witnesses to the shooting. Decedent is gone. De Souza saw nothing in the home at the time. But science, forensics, is a witness to reenact the event. We're going to call witnesses. Miss Kenny Bodden is going to go into that in a few moments. But just so you're receptive to it, science, we embrace it. It's our friend. So you'll see that the evidence will show Philip did not shoot this woman. He did not force a gun in this woman's mouth. And he didn't do it. That's what the evidence will show. And they can't change that by bringing in tall tales from other girls with whom he had relationships. So when
his history with past women, I think, will absolutely come into play here. But he doesn't have a history of murdering women.
you hear all the evidence and we come before you again, I'm confident you'll find that Philip is not guilty of this most
But we've
serious
also
charge.
heard, again, we need to see evidence, I guess, and here's some testimony that he gets incredibly erratic the further down the liquor drink he gets. The more he drinks, the wilder and crazier he gets. Loads of stories about that you can honestly find online. If you're looking at this from a jury perspective, that's not something you would know.
Much. And I don't expect from the evidence that you will appreciate and agree with every aspect of a person's life, every single day of a person's life who's in his 6th decade. But it's the evidence of this case that we're focusing on. It's the evidence here and the lack of evidence Judge Fiddler will give you a charge on. The lack of evidence can also be considered by you when the prosecution
You might
tries
be
to convince
staring
you
at
of
the
something
at
beyond
Judge
a
Willis.
reasonable doubt.
Judge Bruce Willis.
That doesn't. The evidence will show it doesn't. Just doesn't fit. It was nothing. The evidence will show there's nothing similar to this incident with a stranger and to these spats with other women. There's nothing similar about it. This was a sui generis, unique incident, the evidence will show. The evidence will show this was an accident, not at the hand of Philip. Evidence will show that he is not responsible for the death of the decedent. And I want to thank you for agreeing to sit on this case. And I want to thank each and every one of you for the attention you paid to me. And I want to thank each and every one of you for the way you listen to the things I have to say and the way you're open to the evidence. I also want to thank Judge Fiddler, and I want to thank his staff for making me feel at home
Judge Bruce Willis.
in a strange and new
Judge
and different
Bruce
place. Thank you very much.
Ms. Kenny Bodden?
Yes, thank you, Judge. Mr. Porter, the gentleman.
We're about to go into round 3 of defense arguments, ladies and gentlemen. And they're an hour and a half.
I think I spoke.
Ladies and gentlemen, going to do a little commercial here real quick because Mandy worked really hard on 3 new designs that are on PubliclyBuzzed.com, folks. You can go over there and check out this design here with the lightning bolt, the Dandy Savage design with the glasses, which I'm going to get that one, and I'm going to get this one right here. This one is my favorite. The page isn't working, but this one right here. Yes. The fucking Unsolved Mysteries one? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I popped so hard. I was like, yes, when she sent that to me. I was like, I'm definitely getting that one. So those are sweet. And again, Mandy, I'm not sure. I don't think she's come through here this morning, but I was actually going to do this on Feral Friday, and I forgot all night Feral Friday. But yeah, she did some awesome work, man. So yeah, we're going to go in here to the third round of defense arguments. I hear Gypsy coming down. What are you doing, Gypsy? Let's go.
Spoke to some of you last Wednesday or last Thursday, and others earlier this week on Monday, and others I've never spoken to directly. So this is the first time I'm addressing all of you directly. As you know and have heard, my name is Linda Kenny Bodden, and it's a pleasure to finally get to speak to all of you in an opening statement.
This chick's from Law and Crime Network now, I believe, right?
To represent Philip Spector. Let me start out by saying Philip Spector is innocent.
Objection. This is argument.
Instantly. So I'm imagining, I've seen, trailers and some clips from the movie where Pacino plays Spector, and I guess they heavily play on the relationship that he had with his defense attorney. I'm guessing this lady is from that, is who they're depicting in that film. If anybody's watched that movie, let me know how that is. I want to check it out, I believe.
The evidence will show that the science proves he is innocent. Not only does he stand before you presumed innocent, the scientific facts will tell you that he is factually innocent. The scientific facts will show you that the government is selling you a story because they are not giving you all the scientific facts or all the correct scientific facts or even most of the scientific facts. We have one unimpeachable witness who, the evidence will show you, has no motive for or against anybody. The witness has no motive to lie for or against any person. The witness has no memory problems. The witness has no language problems.
I don't know. I'm not sure why we've went through, which, I mean, the first one was one continuous argument where the judge at the end of last week, if you remember, he stopped it. He said, we're done for the day, guys, because he wasn't stopping. Cutler was not stopping. So they just stopped it. So the beginning, that 50 minutes was the end of his actual defense, his opening that started the day before. So yeah, now we have an actual second defense opening from a completely different attorney.
And that witness is called science. One of the reasons that we use science in any area of investigation, especially a criminal investigation, because it can tell you whether witnesses who have memory problems or language problems or motive to lie are mistaken, wrong, or mere out lying.
Your Honor, once again, I have to object. This is argument.
You know what? It's, in a way, it's a form and an opening statement may be used in a sort of a storybook fashion. I'm going to allow it just right now. Objections overruled.
The science will tell you here who did what. The science will tell you what happened. The science will tell you, through the evidence of science, that Philip Spector did not shoot.
The evidence will show you through the evidence of science.
Did not shoot Lana Clarkson, the decedent, that he did not hold the gun, and that he did not pull the trigger. That is one of the central issues in this case. Who was holding the gun? Not who may have found it.
She's reading like
not who may have exposed it. Not who may have owned it. Not where it came from. Only who was holding the gun when the gun went off. The science will tell you that Phil Spector was not holding the gun in the decedent's mouth. The science will tell you that he was not close enough. He was not close enough to hold the gun in the decedent's mouth.
Jen.
The evidence will show you that the government's case is a story made up from people who were not there. The science was there, and it will tell you what happened. And the science does not need fancy PowerPoint presentations. It does not need colors of green and red and gold and blue. It does not need circles, and it does not need lists.
No, it's still appropriate opening statement.
And does not need lists, because we're going to give you and we're going to show you through the science, and you'll see it as it comes in, and we're going to talk about some of them now, just so you have a background. The science will show you in itself, and you will then make the judgments. You will make the lists, you will draw the circles, you will make the conclusions. Science will show you that her death was caused by what is called a...
Yeah, this lady currently works for Law and Crime, Linda Kinney Baden. On-air host Linda Baden is a former criminal prosecutor and trial attorney known for high-profile cases such as Aaron Hernandez and Casey Anthony. She represented music producer Phil Spector, which we're on right now, in his first murder trial, and was portrayed there. Yeah, that was the movie I was talking about, by Dame Helen Mirren in a SAG Award-winning performance for the television film Phil Spector. And again, Spector, we have to watch that. That's going to be interesting. To see Al Pacino in this freaking wigs. Are you kidding me? Linda Baden is a magna cum laude. Graduate of Rutgers University. She then went on to graduate from Rutgers School of Law. Following graduation from law school, she served as judicial clerkship with the presiding judge of the appellate division, Judge John F. Lynch, and then entered private practice with the law firm of Maynor and Landis in Newark. Miss Baden was later appointed assistant prosecutor for the Monmouth, probably butchering that one too, County Prosecutor's Office, where she served as a trial team leader and the trial attorney assigned to the Sex Crimes Investigative Unit. During her tenure with the prosecutor's office, she prepared and tried numerous criminal cases, including those involving murder and the death penalty. Miss Baden is now a private trial attorney who focuses on criminal defense and civil rights. Yeah, I know I'd seen her on the Law and Crime Network.
Self-inflicted gunshot wound. That means you did it to yourself. Science, unfortunately, cannot tell you what was in her mind.
Murder.
Science can tell you that the decedent was holding the gun, that the decedent had the barrel in her mouth with her lips loosely closed on the barrel, and that it was she, the decedent, who pulled the trigger. Science may also have suggested that she even loaded the gun. Mr. Jackson yesterday gave you some hypotheses, scientific hypotheses from what he expects are his witnesses. Hypotheses are merely that. They are speculations. They are not proof. And hypotheses have inconsistencies and assumptions and prejudgments in them. What you heard from Mr. Cutler and what you will see from the science is that somehow conclusions were formed that Philip Spector committed a homicide, a murder, before conducting an unbiased investigation through the science. That the government ignored the science or bent the science when it didn't support their findings, or may have shown that Philip Spector did not hold the gun, did not pull the trigger, was not close enough to do that, and is innocent. The science will tell us what really happened. From the get-go, there was an assumption before the first police report was written that he was guilty. In scientific community, this isn't called engaging in a fallacy, and there'll be testimony on this. It's called circular reasoning in the scientific community. If you assume that a murder is committed and you structure investigation to demonstrate that, then it's not an objective scientific investigation. The scientific evidence here does not support the less reliable evidence that they're going to be putting before you, such as witness recollections, witness statements, because the witnesses, the science will show, were either made mistakes, didn't remember properly, or told deliberate untruths. And we'd like to summarize now for you, Mr. Plord and I, Chris Plord, who will be working with me during this case, the 10 areas that are based on scientific fact that proves that Philip Spector was not holding the gun, did not discharge the gun, did not put the gun in the mouth, and proves his innocence. The first, the location of the bullet wound. The location of the wound and the bullet path of the wound shows it was a self-inflicted wound. The wound in this case, and you're going to hear from the experts, is called an intraoral wound. And that's a technical term that the forensic pathologists use, that is those who are trained in the investigation of unnatural deaths or deaths that occur early in life. They call it an intraoral wound. That means that the gun was in her mouth, her lips were closed around the gun loosely, and that the barrel was in her mouth at the time the gun went off. This is what is called a classic self-inflicted type of injury. Classic self-inflicted type of injury. And it means that somebody volitionally placed the gun in her whole mouth. The wound is in the tongue, part of the wound, which means that the bullet grazed the tongue. Okay. Right? The wound is 1.5 inches back in the tongue. After the tongue, you all have lips and you have teeth, and your whole mouth is about 2 inches. The barrel of this gun was 2 inches. That's how they know the barrel, science knows, was in the mouth, all the way in the mouth. Science will tell you that the general view of forensic pathologists is that you do not swallow a gun like that unless you're volitionally doing it. You're doing it to yourself. So in addition to the fact that it was intraoral, and in addition to the location of the tongue wound all the way back, the bullet grazed her tongue. In addition to that, it means it was also like a contact type wound. It had what's called a stellate appearance, which in fancy words means a star-shaped appearance. That's how come they can tell the barrel was against or on top of the tongue. Additionally, there's no damage to the decedent's mouth outside her mouth. If somebody points a gun and shoots it in front of your face, you're going to have damage outside the mouth. You're going to have damage on the lips. If somebody pushes a gun in your mouth that you don't want to go there, you're going to have broken front teeth. And those teeth will be broken out here in, not in, out. The decedent's teeth were not broken by somebody pushing a gun inside her mouth. They were broken from the inside out, and I'll talk with you a little bit more about what the importance of that is. But what it does mean for now, in terms of the bullet path and the bullet wound, is that no one shoved a gun through her teeth inside a mouth. Now, we don't have the answer to what was in her mind when she put the barrel in the mouth. Was she acting recklessly because of her history, because of the things that happened that night, or some other reason? But what we do know is that she put the barrel in her mouth.
It's true.
We know she...
Alcohol really changes the entire picture. That's true. Someone's mindset can, either way, somebody that would normally not do something like this, enough booze gets into you, depression, you never know.
She was drinking. We know she was taking pills. You'll hear that from the state's witnesses we believe the evidence will show. We know that she had hurt herself before when she was drinking tequila. The state, the evidence will show, had the decedent's computer. We know that in her computer, she wrote that she hurt myself, of course, injured as usual by drinking tequila. We know that tequila was consumed by the decedent that night because her fingerprints are around the neck of the bottle. She had been on years of pain medication, we know, for a very long time, for some unbearable, excruciating, and extraordinarily headaches and chronic pain she was having. We know because the state gave it to us, the government gave it to us, that less than 2 months before she died, in December 2002, she wrote that she really trashed her apartment in the midst of a depression. We also know that in that same December, less than 2 months before she died, she said, "I am going to tidy my affairs and chuck it, because it's really all too much for this girl to bear anymore." According to people that knew her, she was depressed over the holidays, the evidence will show. She had a history of depression going back to 1994, of the type where she couldn't stop crying. Ladies and gentlemen, these were her words. I am not interpreting them. So what she was thinking when the gun was fired by her own hand, we cannot tell you. We can only tell you what the facts are. The path of the wound, the path of the wound, the path of the bullet wound is consistent and entirely characteristic of a self-inflicted wound. This is from their coroner, a forensic examiner named Dr. Pena. See, the path is slightly upward. The same path you would get if you were holding a gun yourself. Upward, upward. Not if somebody is shooting, standing in front of you, shooting downward. It's even more important here because the evidence will show that the decedent was seated in a chair that was very low to the ground, only about 15 inches off the ground. Only about 15 inches off the ground. So the path of the wound entirely shows that she was seated low, and yet the trajectory of the wound, and the trajectory is a fancy word meaning bullet path, is slightly upward, exactly as it would be if she were holding the gun in front of her mouth and in her mouth. The evidence will tell you, or is going to show you, that the first police on the scene, who were untrained in scientific reconstruction, thought the decedent had been shot elsewhere. They thought that there was good evidence that she had been shot on the stairs and moved. And that's why, the reason why, is because when she shot herself, the gases of the gun caused her teeth to project way up onto the stairwell. So they believed initially that somehow Philip Spector, tiny man, carried Lana Clarkson down and placed her in the chair. Apparently, the state's not proceeding on that story.
Because he's tiny.
But that's how the story got birth, because the teeth were elsewhere. When that evidence did not explain the physical evidence, when it was very clear that
Gypsy's going crazy.
Hypotheses, that speculation was not true and did not fly. The next thing the coroner was looking for was some stuff or evidence based on a belief that Philip had somehow shoved the gun up to her teeth and shot her through her teeth. Through her teeth. So they looked for something scientifically called bullet wipe. Very simply, on the tip of a bullet, when it leaves a gun, there's a black substance, a chemical substance, that is black. And so when it's shot, it leaves against something, it leaves a wipe. It leaves a black wipe. That's why it's called bullet wipe. It's very simply a scientific principle. There was no bullet wipe. None. So now they could not explain, the evidence will show, the physical evidence that pointed to the undisputed fact that this was a self-inflicted wound because the gun was not shot outside her mouth. There was no bullet wipe. The gun was in her mouth, all the way in her mouth, loosely closed, and you'll hear why they can tell that when we get to the specific testimony. And the trajectory of the gun wound and the actual stellate shape of the gun wound showed that it was characteristic of a self-inflicted wound. Yesterday, Mr. Jackson told you that there'd be going to be testimony or something that a woman would not have shot herself in the mouth. That simply is old school thinking and untrue.
Objection, Your Honor. That was never part of my opening statement. I never made that statement.
All right. Again, ladies and gentlemen, an opening statement is not evidence, and it will not be judged as such. You may proceed.
We're going to show you through evidence, and we're not going to just sit back. We're going to present evidence to you. And the people that are going to be discussing some of the evidence about the gunshot wound are people that have written several of the textbooks that are used by the people in their industry. In fact, the evidence will show you that one of our people that will be talking to you, Dr. Vincent DeMaio, who just retired as the pathologist, senior head of a major county in Texas, where Mr. Jackson is from, as you all heard. I'm practicing my y'all, Mr. Jackson. Y'all. Okay, thank you. It's tough when you're from Jersey to say it. Dr. Vincent DeMaio, his book is because he met with Dr. Pena, is on Dr. Pena's desk. So you're going to hear from some of the lead people that have written textbooks on these matters, and there's nothing wrong with that. Luckily, Mr. Spector, because of who he had been, is able to, just if you had a heart condition, or if you had something wrong with you and you were dying of cancer, you want to go to the best you can go to. You want to go to the best you can go to. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's the people that even the people that Mr. Jackson will be presented for you go to get some of their information. So, what do we know first? Location and path of the wound. This is a self-inflicted intraoral gunshot wound, which means volitional conduct on her part. It is a key finding of physical evidence that science uncovered. It is a key finding that says this is a self-inflicted wound. Next. Blood spatter. The pattern and distribution of the blood spatter, shows that Philip Spector did not shoot that gun. Now, I just discussed with you the nature of an intraoral wound, and it's crucial for the understanding in a scientific way in order to discuss the blood spatter that this wound was intraoral. To look at the blood pattern analysis that Mr. Jackson talked to you about yesterday, Mr. Jackson told you, and I know I have this right, that blood spatter can only go out in a gunshot wound such as this 36 inches, or a maximum of 3 feet. The evidence is going to show you that that was a misleading statement and untrue, and whoever gave him that information is wrong.
Back, baby!
We had Dr. Henry Lee, the criminalist who has taught a lot of the criminalists in the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, also another author of one of the major textbooks in crime scene investigation, and some of our other people, Dr. Werner Spitz, who has written the lead textbook in forensic pathology. Listen yesterday to what Mr. Jackson relayed to you. He anticipated that the evidence would be on the science. Whoever gave him the hypothesis that blood spatter from an intraoral gunshot wound can only go 3 feet is taking their information not from wounds that are intraoral. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me just digress for 1 second before I tell you what I mean by that. I'm sorry, and I apologize if I seem a bit callous in talking about this item when you're talking about the death of any person. But when you discuss science, these are the kind of items that the criminalists and the forensic pathologists look at. And this is the terms they use, and this is how they discuss them. And so for me to try to explain what I believe the evidence will show to you in the future, I have to use the same type of terms and discussions that they do. And they're used to it, obviously, because they do it every single day of their life. That is their life. So I don't mean to appear callous to the death of anyone when I'm discussing that with you. Intraoral gunshot wounds are not your normal gunshot wound that occurs when you shoot somebody in the large part of their body or through their arms or anything of that sort. And many of the tests that were done with blood spatter are done, unfortunately, with animals to see how much blood spatter could go through. But there's a difference when there is a wound in the mouth when there is no exit to that wound. And here you heard Mr. Jackson tell you that the bullet went in and never exited. Now, why is that important? When a gun goes off, the gases with a gun are huge and enormous. Enormous pressure. If the wound goes through a head or a body or is in a body cavity, Mr. Jackson told you about forward spatter. It goes through with energy and it goes through the body. But if there is an intraoral wound without an exit, the gases get trapped in the head cavity. They have no place to go. And so what happens is a person becomes almost like a chipmunk. They expel back out. And there is no forward spatter. All the gases accumulate, become hugely pressurized, and expel back out.
Ms. Kenny, this would be a good time. We need to take a recess.
Yes, sir.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, keeping in mind the court's admonition, we'll be in recess for 15 minutes. Thank you. All right.
Yeah, for some reason he's like, that's a good stopping point. I need to take a break here. We're having lunch later.
Back on the record, the parties are present, the jurors and the alternates are not? Yes.
Your Honor, this is just a very quick matter, one that I think the court can handle with very little energy.
You have more confidence than I might. Go ahead.
Maybe true. It's been a long week. The photograph that's up on the overhead projector right now, as well as I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, the next photograph that is in line, which is one I'm holding in my hand, I believe those are 2 or 3 of the photographs that are the subject of what I brought up this morning about the late discovery, getting these from Henry Lee on Friday. These are going to be, along with several other items, the subject of a violation of discovery motion that we filed. I think that, and one of the sanctions we're going to request, among other things, is the possible suppression of the evidence. I think Ms. Kinney-Bodden certainly can make the points that she's going to make. Mr. Plord can make the points that they're going to make without showing these to although a couple of them have already been shown briefly, without showing these to the jury until we can fully litigate this issue. We were blindsided by these 55 photographs that Henry Lee took apparently on February 3rd or February 4th, 2003, and has been holding them in abeyance ever since. And there's some question as to which ones are consistent and which ones aren't, and why the 55 photographs have different names and different scan file names, etc. We're seeking the original photos. I mean, there's some substantial litigation that's going to surround these things, and I think there's some questions that very seriously need to be answered about these things.
Again, we're still in the middle of the defense opening. I've never seen anything like this.
I hate to have to try to unring a bell, so I'm simply asking that those 2 photographs that are on the OMO and the following photograph, nothing else, be limited at this point from production to the jury.
Thank you.
Several quick points. Dr. Lee's report was discovered out quite some time ago, along with his note some months ago, where they refer to the photographs. There were detectives that were present when these photographs were taken that turned the location over to Dr. Lee, and Dr. Bodden was also present when these photographs were taken. Yesterday morning, before any opening statements, I went through every one of these photographs with Mr. Jackson, because, we pursuant to the court's directive, show him what we're going to use. Didn't say anything. He just brings this up this morning that, are we going to use these? Well, I showed them to him yesterday, and we just got to move on. These are going to come in my opinion, if there's some sanction, and I hope the court doesn't, make Mr. Spector's or affect Mr. Spector's right to a fair trial. But if there's some sanction, I don't think exclusion is going to be the one. We clearly believe that these are going to be authenticated without question. They tied to Dr. Lee's report that was discovered some time ago.
They have a large pizza for Phil Spector right there at the end of the day.
We did by late last week. We gave him the CD-ROM. All of these pictures are on there. I printed out these that are two of them that I'm going to use. This one and the next one.
Mr. Jackson, were you aware of the photographs yesterday?
I was aware of the photographs yesterday. Quite frankly, I didn't notice as we went through. They looked somewhat similar to crime scene photographs that we took. And Mr. Ford, all due respect, he's relatively new on the case, is unaware that there were no investigators at this location when Dr. Lee was taking his photographs. So we were not aware of what these photographs were. Yesterday, when he flipped through them, I didn't notice which ones they were. I just noticed that they were the interior of the foyer, but they're very different than anything we've ever seen before. Specifically, they're coming from Dr. Lee, and we got them on Friday. There's just absolutely no excuse. And Mr. Ford's argument, I don't know how legal it is, let's just move on. I don't think that does justice to any I don't think that's quite legal parlance. Let's just move on.
I hear those types of arguments all the time.
And they have almost no effect on you. Yes, Judge?
All right. Here's what the court's going to rule. You can certainly go ahead, in light of the potential, that's all I say, and the remedies available to the court, if the court were ever to make a determination that there's been a discovery violation. There are several that can be used. There are some that are suggested that not be used, but in any event, this is a point of contention. I believe that you'll be able to go through your opening statement without using these specific photographs, so we'll just take those photographs and the one following off, and we'll move forward. That does not indicate that in any way what my ruling, if I'm faced with this at a later time, would be. It's just that it's a matter of contention. All right, with that in mind, let's bring in the jurors and the alternates. Thank you. You're welcome. All right, the jurors and alternates are now present, and you may resume your opening statement.
And I ended with that it explodes out of your mouth with the gases.
We remember, Jesus Christ.
Kind of like, and you'll hear evidence of this, kind of like the principle in a soda can, generic. I don't want a product placement here. If you open it, sometimes you hear a poof and there's a little gases, and if you really shake it up and explodes out, and the lips are more pliable. The mouth is more pliable, so it really goes out. It just doesn't go out like a little nozzle. It really goes out, like a cone shape. Now, the reason why there's not that many actual studies is because we don't go around putting guns in people's mouths and shooting them to try to get actual studies of what happens with intraoral gunshot wounds. So therefore, you have to, the evidence will tell you, rely on a lot of the experience of the forensic pathologists that have been doing this for hundreds of years. And one of them that we will bring before you will be Dr. Werner Spitz, who wrote the textbook that's in its 4th edition that all the people in the industry rely on. All right? And they will tell you, the people that do this every day, the forensic pathologists that see intraoral gunshot wounds, that blood, and also the criminalist, Dr. Lee does this, that this type of intraoral, not a normal gunshot wound.
Everything is fine. Things are fine.
To the body where there's an in and out, or a gunshot wound to an arm, or a gunshot wound where there's forward spatter. But this type of intraoral wound with the buildup of the pressure, and because it's in the head, expels blood spatter out 72 inches, 6 feet, and at times even more. It can go 7 or 8 feet. And you're going to hear about some evidence that will suggest that happened here. Now, when Mr. Jackson yesterday told you that it only goes out 3 feet. Remember, the state is going to try to prove to you.
Look at him creepily, like, hanging out back here, like on her shoulder.
That Mr. Spector had to be close to Lana Clarkson. Because the only way somebody could put a gun in somebody's mouth and shoot it is if they're pretty close. They tried to tell you yesterday, and Mr. Jackson told you also, when he told you about the 3 feet, which is absolutely wrong, that the size of the spatter on Lana Clarkson's slip and the size of the spatter on the slip, if you could, on the size of the spatter on Mr. Spector's white coat was equal in size, and therefore that meant, according to, and he put the name of Dr. Lynn Harold up on the PowerPoint slide, that meant that Mr. Spector was standing as close to her as her slip was on her, and that would take him within the 3-foot range. That's what they told you. You can all remember that. The evidence is going to prove to you that that way to look at blood pattern analysis is misleading and wrong. You will be hearing and you will make the judgment. You will be able to make the determination, not because we tell you, but because of what you hear. The evidence will show that to determine how far an item is, such as a white jacket, is away from somebody or far away from somebody. To make a distance determination of how far somebody is standing away from when a gun is shot, you don't just look at the size of the spatter. That is not complete. That is not a complete analysis. You have to look at the size of the spatter. You have to look at the numbers of the spatter on the garments. And you have to look at the density. And I'm going to show you some pictures and what I mean in a second. And the density means unit area. In other words, if I have a unit and 3 feet here or 12 inches here, and there may be, let's say, 100 here, then if somebody is standing next to you, there should be an equal distribution of that spatter, that unit area. So you don't just look at size. You have to take all 3 into account to make a valid and complete determination of distance scientifically. And here it kind of gets drowned out a little bit, but you're going to see the actual evidence. So this is
real-time review of the Wendy's burrito that is out now. It's fucking fire. It's good. It's good as shit. It's super good. Thanks for hanging out this morning, everybody. I am now full. I've got some coffee in me, getting a little bit of pep in my step. Let's go, baby. We're still in part 3 of the defense openings. Yes, I said that right. We're halfway through episode 2 of this trial in the new season of Murder Church, and we're still in the opening statements.
This is just a prelude to what we'll discuss. This is, see these little dots here, drops here all over? That's what we're talking about when we call spatter. This is the right side of the jacket. Again, you see, different spatter. Again, all sorts of spatter. The left side of the jacket, all sorts of spatter and tissue. It's all over her clothes, her jacket, her slip. It's even on the chair. It's the arm of the chair. It goes all over, just as I tell you, it goes out into that cone. And that's just the spatter you can see. And here, you're going to hear testimony, evidence is going to come before you, that some of the spatter was obscure because there was something called a purge, and I just want to demonstrate to you, like if blood comes out or something's put in blood, it may cover up some of the spatter that's below it. his blood comes out. At the medical examiner's office, accidentally, and her jacket was actually put in some of the blood, obscuring some of the, what would be the blood spatter under it. Now, you have to compare the size, the numbers, and the density on Lana Clarkson against the white jacket of Philip Spector. Because if he's standing in that 3-foot zone, if he's standing close to her or next to her, there would be an equal distribution of the size, the number, and the density. And common sense that Mr. Jackson alluded to. If I've got my arm into his face and spatter comes out, it's going to get all over my arm, my coat. It's going to go up my coat, inside my sleeves. It's going to go in the I'm not wearing one, but the shirt cuff. It's going to be
I'm going to use your shirt, sir. Well, give me your arm.
all over. Common sense. Here, in this case, the spatter was all over her jacket, her slip, her chest. Mr. Jackson said, and I believe I had this quote, that Spector's jacket was covered with blood. I thank him for showing the picture first of Philip's jacket, because it was not covered with blood. That whole right sleeve was not covered with blood of the size, the density. It wasn't covered with blood at all. The jacket had at the very most, on the left-hand side only the left-hand side, at the very most 18 blood spatters. And I say at the most because only 7 tested positive under DNA for blood. So there may be as little as 7, but assuming 18, because it doesn't matter, because they're diverse, they're kind of like spread out. There's no pattern, they're random. They are not of the same density. They are not of the same numbers that would have to be found if he were standing next to her and shot her. The reason why is because the evidence will show you he was not standing next to her and shot her, because his right arm was not up in her mouth holding a gun. In addition to the fact that we know the spatter goes around because it's on the chair, it's on her jacket, it's on her slip and all, and it's on the armchair, there was none on Philip Spector's pants. There was none on the shirt he was wearing. I don't have one. The men's shirt. There was none on the cuff that comes out, and you guys all know what I'm talking about, out of your jacket. There was none underneath the cuff here. There was none in his hair. There was none on his shoes. As compared to the amount of the spatter that Lana Clarkson, the decedent, had.
They were training this guy. They're like, when we're actually in court, you're going to want to, not look like a psychopath, staring into oblivion. Let's work on that. And at the end, that's what they got. And they're like, you know what? Perfect. We're rolling with that.
Spector was standing, and Philip was standing close enough to the decedent to put the gun barrel all the way in her mouth and pull the trigger. He would have had an equal distribution, an equal pattern. If he was up there, it would have been all over him, like it was all over her. And it wasn't. And we're able to tell this even though some of the spatter from the decedent was actually removed. And you're going to hear that some of the rules of collection were not followed, that on her hands, the coroner's investigators took off, because they wanted to test it, at the time that in Spector's house, they took off spatter off her hands to test it before properly photographing it and documenting it. And later on, and you're going to hear evidence, I expect the evidence is going to show that there was kind of a big brouhaha between the coroner and certainly some disagreement and the sheriff's lad criminalist, because they couldn't tell from the pictures what was spatter on her hands and arms and what was freckles. And each said it was not my job. But in any event, despite all that, we still have enough, because we have, thank God, a white coat. And we have, thank God, her jacket. And we have her slip. And we have his shirt. And we have his pants. And we have all that. And the spatter shows it was a self-inflicted wound, that Philip Spector was simply too far away, that his jacket was too far away to be, and he was too far away to be holding the gun. What you will hear, I anticipate, is negative evidence. And the evidence will show that the absence of evidence is absence of proof of guilt and evidence of proof of innocence. We've gone through two areas. Number 3, the tissue. Right after blood spatter comes out in an intraoral wound, right after it comes out of your mouth and your nose, okay, the gas is built up from the gunshot wound and body tissue comes out with it. Some of it can be brain tissue. Okay. She is loaded with it. Could I have the left sleeve again? Back. Good. One more is the left sleeve. Well, Mr. Porter's looking at her left sleeve. It was over here, Chris. We showed you already. It was the left sleeve. 1 second, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes the director is not as facile as she should be. Her left sleeve is loaded with it. That's all that white stuff that you see there. Loaded with it. She's got tissue and other parts too. Okay? Now, his clothes have none. Have none. Not his shirt, not his shirt cuff, not his pants, not his shoes, not his hair, not his jacket. None. Tissue, because it has a little bit more of a mass to it when it's mixed with blood, may even go further, than blood spatter. And you're going to hear some evidence here that probably occurred here. He has none on him. The reason why is if he were standing close to her, he would. And the reason why is because he wasn't. The evidence will show you that. And you're also going to hear that when our forensic pathologists and our criminalists were given the court's permission, Judge Fiddler's permission, to view the evidence last May at the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department lab, one of the things they saw on this left sleeve was this, on buttons. Now, well, I have buttons, okay. Buttons, okay? Okay? And they saw that they're loaded with blood and tissue. And they also saw that the buttons had a kind of a hazy or kind of like a melted, greasy appearance. So we had those buttons tested. And it confirmed that this was tissue on those buttons, something that the government had not done as of last May. And that, you will hear, is extremely important because it fixes the position of her hands. That for the tissue, which comes out of the blood, to get on these buttons, she had to have her hands in this classic gun holding position. Had to. So that was an extremely important piece of evidence that no one had looked at until we looked at it. And the tissue goes around kind of like the blood spatter. It's concentric, and it's, again, all over her, and it's not on him. And it proves scientifically that he, Philip, was not near her when she was shot. He was not within that zone of within 3 feet. And really, when you look at him, he's a very small, diminutive man. And you can see, you don't need me to tell you, short arm reach. And so he may even had to be closer than 3 feet if the government is correct in what they told you yesterday, that he put a gun in her mouth and pulled the trigger. What I anticipate you're going to hear is negative evidence of any tissue on Philip. And the evidence will show that the absence of evidence is absence of proof of guilt and evidence of proof of innocence. Gunshot residue. Number 4. The abundance of gunshot residue on her and the lack of gunshot residue on his clothes said he was not near enough to shoot her. He could not be close enough to shoot her. And let me explain what gunshot residue is. It's called in common parlance GSR for short. GSR. Now, when you fire a gun, and this is a picture of a revolver being fired, and the revolver, we'll talk about that's what's involved here. You have a lot of combustion because the powder and the primer has to go with the cartridge and push it out, and it's all very scientific, and they'll explain it better than I will, but you can see it. You can see it. What happens is all these are little particles. That little mist here, because here's the bullet. See the bullet over here? These are mists of particles, and these are burnt, flying. You can see this is burning. This is burnt stuff. So everything is very hot and very burnt. Some of it turns black and burns these particles, and they make like a black soot. And some of them don't burn. Some of them don't burn at all. So you have sometimes burned and unburned particles, but there's lots of them, lots of them. You can see it better in this here. See, it goes backwards, it goes upwards, it goes downwards, it goes forward. According, I anticipate, to their own experts, because we've had something called discovery in this case, that it's undisputed that when you have a revolver and there's a gap here between the cylinder and the gun because it kind of twirls around, it's a piece that fits in, there's also a lot of these particles that come out of there, not just the front, they come out here and in the back. It's called a cylinder gap, okay? It goes out in an intraoral wound like a cloud. And you can see it, a gas cloud. And it goes back, top, side, and bottom, 2.5 feet. 2.5 feet. They looked at the decedent. They looked at her slip, her jacket, the sleeve of her jacket. They analyzed her mouth, her suit, and her hands. And what did they find? There was a lot of this gunshot residue on her. A lot. A lot on her hands, a lot on her jacket. With Philip's clothes, they microscopically analyzed every piece of a shirt. They found none. They analyzed the first 4 inches of the right sleeve of his jacket. They found none. And there'll be no dispute that he's right-handed. Tests show, and you'll hear, that when GSR, or gunshot residue, comes out and lands on clothes, it's very hardy. It can stay around. There's studies that show it can even stay around after clothes have been laundered. It's very hardy. 40 minutes after the police are called and get there, and they have Philip, and they get his clothes, and and his jacket comes down to the police station. Nothing is on those clothes. No gunshot residue, which would have to be there if he were in 2.5 feet of the decedent. Mr. Jackson yesterday told you, or intimated, that the evidence would show that Philip washed his hands because he had 2 particles of gunshot residue on his hands. The evidence is going to show you that that was misleading, that because there are 2 gunshot particles, you see these particles get airborne. And I anticipate that their own coroner criminalist in this case, who authored a study that said you can pick up these gunshot particles just by being in a room where a gun has gone off. You can pick them up by being in a police car, which is where he was. You can pick them up by being handcuffed with police handcuffs, some minor particles such as 2. And you can pick them up even in a police station because they get airborne and around, and they stay around where guns are. They're kind of around. If anyone shoots a gun in a room and stays around, there'll be particles around here that anyone can pick up. To suggest that because he had 2 particles, only one of which was specific to actually a gunshot residue, one could have been from other stuff, rather than merely being in a room that a gun had gone off with, or being in a police car, or being handcuffed, or being in a police station, is to give it a bent on the evidence that doesn't necessarily mean so. It means nothing. On the other hand, we can compare his hands and his clothes, the evidence will show, against hers. She was covered in gunshot residue. Her mouth was covered with GSR. Her hands were covered with GSR. Philip Spector was not covered with GSR. His shirt was not covered. His cuffs were not covered of his sleeves. His jacket was not covered. Why? It's an absence of evidence. And it proves, we will suggest when we get there, that the evidence will show that this means that he did not shoot that gun. He was simply too far away to be holding the gun and get GSR on his clothes. Too far away. It's not supposition, it's not hypothesis, scientific facts that we will present to you. The evidence will show that this absence of evidence is absence of proof of guilt and evidence of proof of innocence. Number 5, the decedent's teeth. You now are all anticipating that when a gun is shot, you all know that the gases again build up and come out. And they're very powerful and very strong. In addition here too, there's going to be evidence that, and we'll show you a picture in a second, that the gun sight, the sight of the gun, which is up here, got caught on Lana Clarkson's front teeth, crowns, and then there's some tooth material, and embedded the teeth into the sight, particles of the teeth into the sight. Other particles, that's the teeth, that's tooth material, embedded into the sight of the gun. Other particles went flying in the directionality of where she was seated. There are particles found here, number 5. There's particles up on the stairs, particles 10 and 11, because of the power of the gunshot wound and the force of the projection of the gun hitting the teeth. Now, their dentists, because they were initially looking for the tooth being broken in because they believed that Phyllis Spector had shoved a gun in her mouth, initially looked at the teeth and said, we can't tell. But at the autopsy, it was confirmed, and you'll hear evidence of this, and the evidence will show you, that if she was shot in front of her teeth, the teeth would have gone back into the throat and down the oral canal. There were none. All of the particles of the teeth were either embedded in the gun or shot outward. Again, intraoral self-inflicted gunshot wound, the evidence will show. One particle of the tooth was actually lost by one of the forensic dentists. And they use a fancy word in the forensic dentist. They call them odontologists. And what it means is a dentist trained, they do this kind of stuff for investigation. It's forensic dentists. We're going to simplify it. But they lost one of the pieces of the front tooth. So we asked a prominent forensic evidence you'll hear, Dr. Richard Souveron, who works for the Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner's Office, which is also another big metropolitan area. And you'll hear about his experience, including him identifying a man named Ted Bundy as a serial killer through dental evidence. We asked Dr. Souveron to look at the teeth that were there, and even though they lost a piece, and see if he could reconstruct it and tell us 100% how the teeth were fractured, outside in, inside out. The finding that he made, you will hear, further confirmed the autopsy finding that the teeth were blown outward from an intraoral gunshot wound.
I've learned a lot about
the gases again from the gun,
style of,
and the recoil of the
through the
gun
mouth.
catching on her top two front teeth
It's definitely good.
pushed the teeth outwards. No one shoved the gun in her mouth. And remember, there was also tooth material on the floor. The location of the teeth on the stairwell, the location of the teeth near the stairs shows that no one was standing in front of that trajectory of Lana Clarkson, the decedent. No one. Additionally, you saw that fine tooth material, which is on, you'll hear testimony on her clothes and all, that there was no tooth material found on Philip Spector. There were no fine particles of tooth material ever identified under a microscope. There was none caught in any cuff of his sleeve. There was none on his jacket. There was none on his pants. There was none on his shoes. There was none on his socks, and there was none on him at all. Again, the evidence will show that the absence of evidence is absence of proof of guilt and evidence of proof of innocence. DNA. I'm not even going to try to spell that one for you. But we all know what it is without really knowing what it is. But it's a scientific, it's a very scientific, important, and responsible in the criminal justice system for both proving people are guilty and proving people are innocent. Unlike GSR, the tissue and blood spatter does not prove, unlike GSR, the tissue and the blood spatter, DNA does not necessarily prove who was holding the gun at discharge, but it shows who was not holding the gun at discharge. Not holding the gun at discharge. They wanted to find out, the government, you will hear, that they wanted to find out who loaded the gun, who loaded the bullets in the gun. And sometimes the bullets can be called cartridges. Here they are, right here, see them. And you see that the investigator, and we know when this picture was taken about 6:40 in the morning, right after Mr. Spector was arrested and taken into custody about 6:09, about 6:40 in the morning, because in another picture you'll see, we anticipate, there's an investigator's watch, which shows the time. And you see that they wear gloves, the investigators. And the reason why they wear gloves is because they don't want to handle with their own skin, raw skin, a piece of what may be evidence. Because when you handle something, like I'm handling this pen, or I'm handling this, or I touched Mr. Plord on his face, you transfer your DNA.
She just likes grabbing that guy.
To that item you're handling it. Trace amounts of DNA. It's called trace evidence. So that's why they use gloves, and that's important. And it's an important thing for an investigator to use gloves. So they took the bullets to the crime lab, and they asked Mr. DNA to give us the answer about who loaded the gun. And what did Mr. DNA say? Not Philip Spector. There was no DNA from Philip Spector on the back of the cartridges that were swabbed that were remaining in the gun and the one cartridge that had been emptied. The Los Angeles Sheriff's Department website even discusses this principle of trace evidence. It was developed by a French professor named Lecard, and it's the basis of all the crime labs in the United States.
He just like got this crazy look on his face all of a sudden. Oh, I've got to find out. There's an Italian horror movie with this little kid that reminds me exactly of this fucking dude, and it's creepy as shit. And I have to find it. Hold on.
And the principle basically is that every contact leaves a trace. Every contact leaves a trace. It's been a principle that's been solving crimes for 100 years. Here, when they swabbed the back of these cartridges here, they found only Lana Clarkson's DNA and some other unknown person. Some other unknown person, not Philip Spector's DNA. There is no magic wand that somebody could try to pathetically clean up a crime scene and take bullets out of a gun and in a magic wand wipe off your DNA and leave two other people's DNA on the cartridges.
So he reminds me of this kid called Michael from a movie called Burial Ground. And this kid used to creep the shit out of me, and I don't know why this dude has the same freaking vibes as this kid right here. It's the same. It's the fucking same vibes, dude. I'm telling you. And that movie's crazy because this kid is so freaking creepy. He has a really weird relationship with his mom. He's like, Mommy. It's, I'd imagine this is that guy's a child. That's where I'm at with it.
In science, that can't be done. Again, the evidence will show the absence of evidence, DNA evidence, belonging to Philip Spector on these cartridges is absence of proof of guilt and evidence of proof of innocence. Number 7. Mr. Cutler touched on this, and I mentioned it. It's the physical size and disparity issue between Mr. Spector. By the way, this is a picture, just so you see, of when we talked about the lab. This is the Sheriff's Department crime lab. Some of our criminalists and Dr. Lee, some of our blood spatter people, and Dr. Harold, who you heard from Mr. Jackson yesterday, last May, as we're all examining the evidence. Okay, and going back to the physical size disparity, Mr. Cutler initially started to tell you about it, and I just want to discuss it a little more, because the physical size disparity and the physicality and lack of physicality of Philip Spector on his part confirms the fact that he could not have gone up there and shoved a gun in Lana Clarkson's mouth and shot it under the facts that you have at this scene and this death scene. She's nearly 6 feet tall, much like our lovely coordinator.
So, like, that makes that part, anyways, because she was making the point, you know, the way the gun was positioned, it would be the way, shouldn't even probably be doing that, but, you know, YouTube's going to freak out of that, but holding it with an angle upward, and that was how the angle went through her face, through her mouth. You know, but he's a short dude. He would be pointing it up just like that. Like, here's the, like, you know, he's going to be 5'5", 6 foot.
Sheriff's officer, Miss Trower. She is younger. He is diminutive, and you'll hear evidence that at the time, and this came from their top, what they did is they did testing of Mr. Spector's blood when they arrested him. They took his blood, they tested it. And they found in his blood what is called a neuroleptic, okay? And it's a drug that was found in his system. They only tested for one, even though you're going to hear evidence that there was some issue that he needed his medication for another one. But they found this in his system, and they know, by finding in the system, what this drug is. And some of you may, seated here, have seen Mr. Spector's hands shake. That is one of the side effects of this drug that he was on that night, because they tested his blood and they found it. It kind of mirrors and mimics a Parkinsonian-like tremor. And some of the reasons, some of the ways you don't show it is by putting your hands in your pocket, much like Michael Fox, the actor, does when he acts now. The prosecution told you he was drunk. The science shows he was not standing next to her. The physical size disparity, the medical disparity, and all the things the prosecution tells you about with regard to his physical capabilities confirm and support the science that he did not go up to Lana Clarkson and push a gun in her mouth and shoot her. Number 8, the blood clotting on the diaper. The evidence is going to show you, it shows innocence, not as Mr. Jackson.
Jay, did you see who I think this guy looks like?
Indicated to you yesterday that it shows guilt because it's some type of cleanup of a scene. Mr. Jackson told you that the blood on the diaper was clotted and that it needed 5 minutes to get that way. And therefore, he imputed to you and suggested to you some type of guilt on behalf of Mr. Spector, on behalf of Philip, because it needed so long to clot that clearly Philip came into the house later on and developed some kind of, quote, as he said, pathetic plan to clean Lana Clarkson's face for some reason with this cloth and all. Again, the evidence is going to show you that whoever gave Mr. Jackson his information about the clot on the diaper is misinformed. The clot on the diaper is called clotted coagulate. And it goes back again to that intraoral gunshot wound. When there is that intraoral gunshot wound in the head, you get spatter, but you also get, as we saw with the tissue, blood that comes out in clumps, because it has what's commonly called snot, saliva, brain tissue, or other tissues in it. But it has other stuff in it. It's not pure. The studies which show that blood needs 4 to 5 minutes to coagulate are studies done with pure and pristine blood, we will show you, with a test tube. So if you go to a doctor and they put alcohol to make sure the needle's clean, and they withdraw your blood, and then you put it in a test tube, and if the test tube doesn't have some kind of preservative, it'll start clotting after 4 or 5 minutes. That's not the case when blood comes out in clumps as coagulated clots from an intraoral gunshot wound. It can happen immediately.
Dude, she's very expressive when she starts getting into the graphic nature of a lot of this stuff. I was eating a breakfast burrito earlier when she was getting pretty deep.
Cloth around the area, which would be a diaper, and the evidence is going to show you that diapers were in Mr. Spector's house. They were used for a number of purposes. They were all around. And somebody picks up a cloth to try to help somebody and gets, remember, coagulated, clotted blood on it. That could be evidence and is evidence of innocence, not evidence that somebody's trying to clean up a crime scene, as was imputed to you. My God, can you imagine if that hadn't been done, he'd be considered a monster. And the diaper was left right there where the police could have it. And it wasn't washed off. And you'll hear that from the spatter experts. If something is diluted and washed, there may be water in it. You can either have water on the diaper before or water after. But this clot was on top of the diaper. The clot wasn't washed off. It was on top of the diaper. Sherlock Holmes, and I like him because the author of Sherlock Holmes had 3 names, Arthur Conan Doyle, and since I've become Linda Kenny Bodden, I kind of like people with 3 names. Once said that circumstantial evidence is a very tricky thing. It may seem to point very straight to one thing, but if you shift your own point of view a little bit, you may find it pointing in an equally uncompromising manner to something entirely different. This scientific evidence does not show guilt or proof of cleanup of a scene. I'm almost done, Your Honor.
All right.
Number 9. The evidence will show that Mr. Spector did not try to cover up the scene, and the gun was not planted or wiped. So Cutler alluded initially, how do you react to this stuff? Who knows? There's no scientific studies on that. But we have pictures of the gun, and you're going to be seeing them at the scene. And they're very hard to, let me see if I can. But you see all this blood here, and there's blood on top of the grips here. By the way, because I think there'll be some evidence. See how grips of guns are kind of striated and all? You don't get fingerprints off that, and you barely ever get fingerprints off the nature of the metal in the guns and all. So they look for DNA now. But look at the blood here. It's on top, and here and here. There's blood over here. There's blood over here. Let me see the other picture. That's the one side. You see there's blood all the way down here, which is exactly where you get it if somebody, again, has a gun in a classic position, because there's nothing in front of the handle. You get blowback, spatter right here. You see blood all over that gun. If somebody's wiping a gun down, this would all be wiped off. And there is, on the other side, on the top of the grips, there is blood at the scene. That gun then goes through the lab, you'll hear, and it gets tested. Some of the blood gets taken off it to do DNA. And it's not examined microscopically until June of 2003. So the pictures become very important to show you that at the scene,
this has been good.
This gun has got a lot of blood at it.
Honestly.
And the evidence is going to suggest to you by the time it's looked at in June of 2003, it's not in the same condition. Mr. Jackson said something to you about, you're going to hear from a Mr. Carroll, who's going to say that if somebody killed himself, the gun would be across the room. And therefore, there was some attempt by Mr. Spector to plant the gun. First,
I just lodged this objection to make sure the record's clear. I did not say anything of that nature.
And again, I'll remind the jury that this is not evidence. These are opening statements. Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you.
Judge, do you want me to break for lunch or you want me to finish?
Well, it depends how much further.
I have 2 more and an ending. I think maybe we should break.
All right, we'll take a break, and then we'll hear
Lord, yeah, we still have like 15
the
minutes.
remaining opening statement, portion of the opening statement after lunch, then we'll begin with evidence.
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind
2 full episodes of Murder Church are opening statements.
We'll be in recess till
What
1:30
the
this
hell?
afternoon. Thank
I hope
you.
we can get into evidence, though, today. At least a little bit.
All the parties and jurors are present as heretofore. And ladies and gentlemen, just before we resume, if I might, because I wanted to let the jurors, of
Judge
course, know
Bruce
how much
Willis.
we appreciate them. One of the things you're told the first day you appear for your orientation is that everybody has to serve on jury duty. Nobody is exempted. You know what this is. Let's see if it's going to turn out to be a trial date. So we'll work. For those
It
of you,
is
this
Bruce
is a jury
Willis. I'm
summons.
telling you right now.
See if we can make plans. I probably can get it postponed if it is. Let's see.
In my case, I'll stipulate.
No, thank you, sir. Not exempted, postponed. There's a difference. When do we have to go? Gosh, what's the date? Oh, here we go. August. We're safe. Okay. You may resume.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen, before we started with lunch, we were at number 9, that Philip Spector did not try to cover up the scene, and the gun was not placed or wiped down, and science will show you that. And you're going to have these pictures when you finally get them into evidence and all. But this is just to try to give you a little background of what we intend to show, or what we intend to think that you're going to hear. You see, we talked about all the blood over here, and there'll be more blood and tissue you'll see when you see the other pictures on the one side of the gun. And again, there's blood on the top of the ridges here, and then inside the ridges where it's going to go, where there's blowback and spatter because of the power that we talked about. Now, with regard to that gun, with those two pictures, there was an indication that because there may have been some smears on one side of the gun, that would prove to you, or anticipated that would be proved to you, that Philip Spector somehow moved the gun and placed it under the decedent's foot. First of all, by the time these pictures are taken of where the gun is, you have heard, and you're going to hear more about it when we have evidence, there was what's called a takedown of Philip by several police officers using a ballistic shield in that area of his foyer. And despite the fact that his house has been called a mansion, that foyer is only about 10 feet wide from the mirror to the stand case. It's a very small area and he was taken down in. And God knows what got kicked or moved or whatever in the takedown. But we do know that something was kicked or moved in the area of the gun during the time of the takedown, before and at the time these pictures are taken. And the reason why we know that is, if you recall, there's going to be testimony, it's anticipated, that there was something called a taser used 2 times on Philip. And what a taser is, it's kind of like an old stun gun. It comes out from a gun with little wires. They're called leads. They kind of look like that. And at the end of a lead, there is a hook, kind of like a fish hook. And that fish hook comes in different sizes. And we don't know which size was used on that. It doesn't really matter. That fish hook is on the end of the leads. And that fish hook goes into somebody, and then electricity, 50,000 volts of electricity then go into somebody. After that happens later on, that fish hook is pulled out along with the lead. And that lead is a little tiny thing, kind of like a plasticized thing, like that. There it is. And that lead is under the 2 feet of the decedent. It's under the 2 feet of the decedent, which simply, the evidence will show, could not have happened if the decedent's feet were there in the first place. So by the time the pictures are taken, where the gun is located here, we don't know what got kicked, if the gun got kicked and moved, but we do know that things in this area were moved because the lead of the taser that went in for Mr. Spector are under her feet in the pictures supplied by the police. So the evidence will show that that suggests that no one placed a gun there. Additionally, Mr. DNA comes back into the picture because Mr. DNA was taken off the gun.
Hey, motherfuckers!
And Lana Clarkson, the decedent's DNA, was all over the gun, along with possibly another person. No DNA belonging to Philip Spector was found on the gun. Again, science will tell you that there's no magic wand. You can't go around and erase DNA from one part of a gun and not the other. You can't do it and leave all this other stuff on the gun. And if there is going to be any testimony of a possible type wipe, the gun is on the carpet that's being kicked around when there's the takedown, and moved around when her feet are being moved around. So no one knows exactly what the position, evidence will show, of that gun was. The evidence will further show that in studies done with people who have self-inflicted wounds, guns can go anywhere. They can be in the hands of the person, they can be at the feet of the person, they can be one side of the room, the other side of the room. If they shoot with the right hand, they could end up on the left. You just don't know because there's too many variables associated with possible recoil, maybe possible hitting of teeth, maybe possible movement even by police officers on the scene. And you're going to hear, I anticipate, the evidence will show about all that studies. So you can't impute that some scene was planned in some pathetic attempt under scientific principles, because the scientific principles don't support that. Additionally, you see there was all these people on the scene. Some are wearing gloves, some are not. Some are wearing booties, some are not. Some, I don't see any hairnets on them. There's all these people on the scene. But additionally, we know.
And there is Lana and a bunch of people around the body here.
That the shoes, the evidence will show, that the decedent was wearing, were photographed and looked at by the police. And they did a lot of things. They also took fingerprints. They actually could see what is a fingerprint here. They took fingerprints on a lot of this stuff at Philip's house. They did not fingerprint the commode, the evidence will show, where they believe the gun was. They're telling what the gun was. But they fingerprinted the brandy glasses, they fingerprinted the tequila bottle, and they could see a fingerprint on the bottom of the shoe. And they took that fingerprint and they lifted it because they were looking to see whether Philip Spector moved the body. And here is the fingerprint. This is a picture from their own fingerprint lab. To see if Philip Spector moved the body. And what they found was that fingerprint did not belong to Lana Clarkson and did not belong to Philip Spector. Belongs to somebody else. The fingerprint on the bottom of her shoe shows that Philip Spector did not, we tend to show, move the body. Scientific fact. So we have discussed the fact that there's DNA on the gun, but not belonging to him. There's a fingerprint on her shoe, not belonging to him. There's taser leads showing that the scene was changed around before any photographs happened. Additionally, we anticipate you're going to hear that every single inch of Philip Spector's house was searched, and a lot of it photographed. So they knew, and they picked up what was important. They picked up anything that was important. They didn't find anything else. They didn't find any other clothes or change of clothes or anything like that. And what you hear, Mr. Jackson told you yesterday, that there was this pathetic attempt to clean up the scene. What the science shows is that the diaper with the blood clot being left there, the jacket being left upstairs and asked for to come to police by Mr. Spector, as Mr. Cutler told you about. The fact that the gun was still there, the fact that cartridges were still there, that it was there waiting for the police. The evidence will show no one attempted to put anything in the garbage. No one attempted to put anything in the trash. No one attempted to burn any evidence. No one attempted to go in the backyard and dig any evidence. Rather, it's right there in plain view for the police to find, as they did after Philip said, "Come in, you've got to see this." That's number 9, ladies and gentlemen. Philip Spector did not try to cover up the scene. The gun was not placed or wiped down, and the scientific proof shows you that. Number 10. Lana Clarkson, the decedent, had a broken
It's like, Jesus Christ.
acrylic tip of the nails. I don't know if the men know this, but sometimes women get acrylic tips put on their nails, makes them last longer, go longer. It's on the right thumb. Pathologists will tell you it is a classic sign of a self-inflicted wound. Because when you thumb a gun and the recoil goes back, it hits your right thumb.
It's like, I will 100%
And many times
suck on the spin.
will crack a fingernail. A scientific fact, a classic sign of a self-inflicted wound.
She's doing an amazing job. Like,
Just quickly recap the 10 items we believe you're going to hear about.
She's selling me on some shit.
That there is negative evidence in this case. There was the location and trajectory of the wound.
I've never seen her before, outside of like literal clips for blog crime.
That means the gun was in the mouth, lips loosely closed, lips around the barrel. A classic self-inflicted wound. The trajectory, classic self-inflicted trajectory. The blood spatter. There simply wasn't enough blood spatter on him. Any smears he may have been on him, Mr. Jackson told you he wiped Lana Clarkson's face. He said an attempt to cover up. We suggest the evidence is going to show an attempt to help her. And any blood spatter, any transfer smears he may have on his buttons or on his right cuff if he had any, anywhere on that jacket, underneath, whatever, may have come from that. But it's not spatter. So the blood spatter, the size, the distribution, and the density clearly show that Philip Spector was not close enough to the decedent to shoot her. The tissue, the size, the distribution, density, the lack of tissue on Philip Spector clearly shows that he was not close enough to shoot her. The GSR, number 4. She is covered with GSR. His clothes are not covered with GSR. The negative evidence shows that Philip Spector was not close enough to shoot her. The teeth being propelled out directly in front of her shows that Philip Spector was not in front of her pushing a gun into her mouth. The fact that the teeth are broken from the inside out shows that it's an intraoral wound from a self-inflicted wound, not broken teeth from somebody pushing a gun and jamming a gun in somebody's mouth. That's number 5. Number 6. The DNA on the cartridges only belonged to Lana Clarkson and some other unknown person.
A sleep paralysis demon.
I'm telling you like it is.
Oh my God, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for hanging. Wow. Sarah, that was amazing.
Not Philip. There is no DNA on the gun belonging to Philip. The physical size disparity and shakes of this man shows a difference and supports
this small shaking man could have not murdered this woman.
Scientific proof that he was not close enough and could not, under common sense, push a gun in her mouth and shot her. The blood coagulation, the blood clot on the diaper, is entirely consistent with him helping her. One of the things I forgot to mention is I anticipate you'll hear from Dr. Pena that when somebody is shot, even though they may be instantaneously dead, they can take what's called a few agonal breaths. They're not real breaths, but that happens. It looks like you're breathing. It looks like you're breathing. Perfectly appropriate that somebody want to help somebody who may have taken a few breaths to look like they're breathing. Not scientifically consistent with guilt at all. The scene was not cleaned up. Everything was waiting for the police officers. The gun was not wiped down. The gun location was not placed by Philip Spector. The science tells you that. The fingernail, number 10, God. A classic sign of a self-inflicted wound. The scientific evidence will show you here that Philip Spector could not have been close enough to Lana Clarkson, and law enforcement presumed Philip Spector was guilty of murder, and the science will show you that they sought to bend the scientific evidence to support a theory,
yes,
not see what it actually showed. We're going to be asking you very soon in the future for you to look at all this.
Oh, Lord.
For you to dig behind the scenes. For you to look at the science, not look at old stories. For you to look at the science of February 3rd, 2003, not old stories of the past. We want you to follow the path of science. We are convinced, if you keep an open mind and do that, you will find that the evidence shows that Lana Clarkson was holding the gun and tragically shot herself. We ask each juror to listen to the science. Through science, you will bring truth to justice, and you will bring justice to truth. If you do that, we are convinced.
She's winding it down. Wow. Opening statements took a long time. It literally took
and your patience
5+ hours.
Consideration.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are the people ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor. I just need a quick moment. We're going to ask Dorothy Melvin to join us.
All right.
Dorothy Melvin.
Yes.
I'm gonna show you guys this promo real quick for the new merch that I'm super jazzed about. Next, Phil Spector's ex-girlfriend, Dorothy Melvin. Here we go. Someone close or formerly close to the sleep paralysis demon, who also claims he threatened her at gunpoint. So he's got a little bit of a history with guns, guys. But yeah, thanks everyone for hanging out this morning. I appreciate the shit out of it. Murder Church growing every week. New trial, second week. Phil Spector, absolute maniac, seemingly. That was a really good opening, though. I don't know what you guys are talking about. I'm not crazy. I thought she did an incredible job of casting some doubt there. But I want to see what's happening. We got a long fucking way to go. I know that. We're going to be here for a long time. We need to get comfortable with this one. So, but I'm into it. It's an interesting one, to say the least. But yeah, we have some new merch, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to hit the stinger real quick. Boom! Buy the merch. Get the merch. I'm about to get some merch actually for some streams, because I'm in love with the Unsolved Mysteries, the Publicly Buzzed version of that. Go hit that up. Thanks again, Mandy, for coming through. And I've got some other designs too. I'm not even done. That's just 3 of what she sent me. So everyone hanging again, thank you all so much. We're going to keep moving here. We're going to get into finally something. It's a little bit of evidence, some testimony again from an ex-girlfriend, Dorothy Melvin, of Phil Spector. This is 43 minutes. We should be able to get through this week 2, going into week 3. Thank you all so much for hanging and banging. I really appreciate it. Love you guys. Let's go.
Thank you for coming. I'd like to invite your attention to July of 1993. Did you know Phil Spector?
I did.
Do you see him here in the courtroom?
I do.
Could you point to him just for the record and tell us what he's wearing today?
The gentleman in the gray suit, black shirt.
Indicating Mr. Spector for the record.
When did you first meet Phil Spector?
Somewhere in the early 90s, I think around 90, somewhere around there.
Where were you when you first met Phil Spector?
A mutual friend was my house guest in New York, at my home in New York, and she told me that he was taking a group of people out that night to a jazz club and wanted to meet the person she was staying with and invited me to come. I had a friend and the 2 of us went.
And your best recollection was this was the early 90s, maybe 1990, 91? Event, you met Phil Spector, correct?
Mr. Spector came and sat down next to me at a table that was set for 17.
Did you have some conversation with him?
Yes, he was very charming, very attentive.
And how long did you spend with him that evening?
He's doing stuff from the other realm of hell. From the other side. Look at these eyes. He's literally affecting our stream. This demon from hell, Phil Spector.
Maybe 20 minutes. My friend was flying back to California, and he had to leave, so we left.
When is the next time that you heard from Phil Spector, or any message that you assumed was from Phil Spector?
The following evening, I came home from work, and there were a number of messages on my answering machine. And the first 2 were the song "Let the Four Winds Blow" in their entirety. And I thought there were children that were messing around and playing, and kind of, kids. And then the next message was from him. I don't recall what he said. It was kind of a rambling message, and there might have been 1 or 2 like that. The message after that was a young woman named Paulette Brandt who said, "Miss Melvin, this call is for you. I am Paulette Brandt. I'm Phil Spector's secretary. Mr. Spector would like to see you tonight at the Ritz Towers."
And this was Paulette Brandt. Let me ask you a few more questions about your last answer. The voice that you heard, the first voice, the male voice, on the telephone messages, did you recognize that as Phil Spector's voice from the day before?
I recognized the voice. He also said, "This is Mr. Spector."
How about the songs? What were these songs again?
It's a song called "Let the Four Winds Blow," and the lyrics are, it's embarrassing. I like the way you walk, I like the way you talk.
Did it mean anything to you at the time?
Well, at first I thought it was just children playing.
When you first met Phil Spector, did you know before that, or did you learn that he was somehow involved in the music business, or had been in the past?
Absolutely. It's a legendary name in the music industry. And I am a child of the 50s and 60s. I was always a big fan of his music.
After the message from Paulette Brandt, did you call her back?
She called me again and said there was a limo on its way to pick me up.
And did you go?
I did.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
My mutual friend came home and said she had gotten a number of phone calls from him.
Seriously. Sustained.
Let's go to her state of mind. I think it's relevant.
In that case, I'll receive it, not for the truth of the matter asserted, ladies and gentlemen, and I could explain that to you, but to explain certain actions that took place after that, but not for the truth of the matter asserted. You may... It's all right. You may finish your answer.
Okay, well, she came home, and I said, guess what, you're never going to believe this. Phil Spector wants to see me. And she said, he likes you. He's been calling me all day at work.
And so because of that and everything else, you went out with him, is that correct?
I went to the Ritz Towers, to a suite at the Ritz Towers.
Very few photos where he doesn't look like an absolute psychopath.
That started a dating relationship between you and Phil Spector.
It did.
And this lasted for some time?
A couple of years.
At the time, what were you doing? What was your employment?
I was manager to Joan Rivers.
And that lasted for some period of time?
Lasted 23 years.
Okay. At the time that you first met Phil Spector, where were you living?
I was bi-coastal. I had an apartment in New York and a home in California.
And when you met or saw or dated Phil Spector, where was that? In California or in New York?
In New York. He was living primarily in New York. I thought that was his only residence.
Did you later learn that he had another residence?
Yes, I did.
And when was that and how did that happen?
I don't know. It was during course of conversation, my Pasadena home, whatever, nothing memorable.
During the period of time from the early 1990s until the date that I started our conversation with, July 2nd of 1993, did you see Phil Spector often? Can you characterize how often or did?
That's really difficult to say. With Phil, it's more of a casual dating relationship because Phil goes into...
The objection is non-responsive. Sustained, and the answer is stricken. You may re-ask the question.
Did you see him from time to time, and can you characterize how many times a month or it was?
That's why it's difficult to answer.
Okay. Your Honor, we put up here, I'd like to mark as People's 1 for identification a photograph that I think has Phil Spector and this witness in it. May that be so marked?
All right, so marks People's Exhibit 1 for identification.
That's a slightly more normal look for Phil Spector, considering. All right, considering.
Ma'am, you can see our exhibit up here on the screen. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, I do.
And why do you recognize it?
It was taken at a Christmas party where he accompanied me.
Approximately when?
He came a couple of times with me. It would have been 92, 93, perhaps even 91. That one might have been, because of the length of my hair, that might have been 93.
And you said a business party?
No, Joan Rivers had a Christmas party every year. And I always brought a date.
And you said that he may have gone once or twice, is that correct?
No, he went twice for sure. I think it might have been 3 times.
Now I'd like to invite your attention to the date that I gave you earlier, July 2nd, 1993. Do you have that time in mind, that 4th of July weekend?
I do.
Did you travel somewhere? that week?
I traveled from New York to Los Angeles.
Why?
It was the 4th of July weekend. I was going to spend it with friends and family.
In California?
In California, yeah.
Where in California?
Well,
Yeah, I
at
believe
my
she said
house
she
in
was the
California,
manager of Joan Rivers for like 20-some years.
and my sister in Laguna Beach, and I was just going to go around and see family and friends.
So you were traveling out here to the Southern California area?
Yes.
Prior to that trip, did you have any discussion with Phil Spector that you were coming out here?
Yes, I did. I spoke to Phil.
Excuse me, objection, the question's been answered.
Without perhaps a little less vigorously, thank you. The objection is sustained. When asked a question, I know it's difficult because most people aren't familiar with the witness stand. If you can answer it as directly as you can. Thank you.
I will try.
All right.
You flew out?
I flew out.
Prior to flying out, did you have a conversation with Phil Spector, and did you discuss your plans?
Yes.
And what did you say, and what did Phil Spector say about your plans for that 4th of July weekend?
I said I was flying out for the holiday because I had a few days off, and he said, why don't you come over?
And what did you say to that invitation?
Fine.
And so then your plans that weekend included spending time with him?
At that point, yes.
What time did you arrive on July 2nd, 1993 here in Los Angeles? Morning, afternoon, evening?
It was evening.
Okay.
Early evening.
And where did you go? What did you do first?
I went first to my parents because I kept my car there. And I picked up my car, and then I drove out to Phil's.
And where did you go when you drove to Phil's?
I drove to the Pasadena house.
Had you ever been there before?
No, he gave me directions.
Okay. You followed them and had no trouble finding his house?
I think I called him at least twice, perhaps 3 times from my car phone, because I was having a little difficulty in Pasadena.
And you eventually arrived at his home?
I did.
Your Honor, we'd like to mark as People's 2 another set of, I think, 2 photographs that are up on the board here of a home at 1210 Arroyo in Pasadena. May that be so marked.
All right, 2 photographs, A and B, People's 2, marked for identification.
Thank you, Your Honor. Invite your attention to the screen up here. You've had a chance to look at this photograph before taking the witness stand, correct?
Yes.
In some detail close up, right? Where you had a chance to look.
I saw these photos.
Does that look like the home that you went to on the July 4th weekend in 1993 where you met Phil Spector?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. So about what time did you get to Phil Spector's house?
I don't know, somewhere around 8, 9, 10 o'clock.
Okay. Now, you'd left that morning from the East Coast, from New York City, right?
I'd left that afternoon.
Okay. So you were 3 hours ahead, so to speak. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. What happened when you got to his house? What did you do?
I went in, and he showed me around the living room. He has lots of memorabilia. He has John Lennon's guitar on a stand. He's got a number of wonderful, wonderful things to look at. And we just...
On Thrill Friday, if anybody after this wants to watch a replay of what we went over on the YouTube version, I went over some John Lennon stories from Phil Spector. They worked together. Of course, he produced Let It Be. He worked with the Beatles, but he worked with John Lennon on a number of occasions. And they were friends, essentially. So
chatted, talked. He played the piano. We danced. He had music playing. We talked. He talked. And he was drinking.
Did you have anything to drink that evening?
No, I'm not a drinker.
When you say that the defendant, Phil Spector, was drinking, describe that for us.
Well, I mean, the most vivid scene is him at the piano with a 5th of vodka. It was a red label, and it was clear it was vodka. And he kept picking it up and drinking.
Drinking from the bottle.
Yeah, the bottle was going down.
Could you describe the bottle for us? Was it a...
It was round, round with a handle.
But it had a handle?
A glass, yeah, it was all a glass bottle with a handle.
And during... I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. During the course of the evening that you spent with the defendant, how much of that bottle did he drink?
My recollection is...
Excuse me. I'm going to object. As vague, how much did she testify to how much she saw him drink?
I believe the question clearly calls for how much he observed, and that's the way I accepted the question. With that understanding, the objection's overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. You can answer.
There were about 2 inches left in the bottle by the...
Do you know whether or not it started off as a full bottle? Did you see that?
It was, like, there's a glass handle, and when he first...
Happy birthday to me! I just found that out. That's awesome. I had no clue.
Took it out, it was at the top of the handle.
And you saw him drink it down to just a couple inches? Is that what you said? Okay. And you indicated,
I don't know what
2
that
inches,
is.
Your Honor?
I think it's 2 inches.
That's about 2 to 3 inches.
Thank you. And you didn't have anything to drink?
No.
So how late did this evening with the piano and the drinking and the dancing and the singing go on to?
It went on quite late. At some point, we went to the second floor and we shot pool and just chatted and laughed. It was a lovely evening. It really was a nice evening.
In this house, which was in Pasadena, do you recall how many stories it was? How many floors?
I didn't go beyond the second story. I know there was another story above it. There might have been 2. I don't recall.
At some point, did you fall asleep?
At some point, he disappeared, and I sat down on the couch in the living room, and next thing I knew, I woke up.
Well, let me ask you a question or two about that. You just said that Phil Spector disappeared at some point after you played pool. Is that right?
After we came back downstairs, he played piano a little bit more, and then I assumed he went to the restroom.
Okay. In your prior experience, and you've been seeing him, as you told us, for a while,
Thanks, Jessica.
was that unusual for him to disappear? Or
No, not at all. Not at all. He would go away for an hour or two, and
without announcing it?
no.
So you weren't initially surprised by that?
No, not at all.
And you said in an earlier answer that at some point you fell asleep.
Correct.
Where?
On the white couch in the living room.
On the first floor?
On the ground floor, yes.
And were you in your street clothes, how you come, or did you change?
I was still in my clothes, still in my shoes.
Could you describe, if you recall at all, and I know it was a long time ago, how you were dressed that evening and how you were dressed when you fell asleep?
Thanks, guys.
I was wearing a black turtleneck sleeveless dress with a fuchsia, hot pink fuchsia jacket.
And do you have any sense of what time it was when you fell asleep?
It felt like before daybreak. It was still dark, but just a little.
When you fell asleep?
No, when I fell asleep, probably about midnight, 1 o'clock.
And then at some point you woke up?
Yes.
The next day?
Correct.
And you anticipated my next question. Do you have any sense of what time it was when you woke up?
It was sometime before daybreak.
Oh, it's still dark outside?
Still dark, but a little glimmer of...
It's just starting to be twilight. Is that right?
Yes.
What happened next?
I got up and I started looking around. I called Phil, and he didn't answer. And then I walked from the living room into the foyer, and I saw the front door open. I looked out the front door, and he was standing there pointing a handgun at my brand new little green Mercedes.
He was outside?
He was outside.
In the dark?
Well, it was lit from the front of the house.
But you could see him?
Oh, yeah. He was only a couple feet away from me.
How far? Can you point to something in the courtroom? Mr. Jackson?
The edge of the desk here.
That's about 8 to 9 feet.
Thank you, Your Honor. So after calling out for Phil, walking outside, you saw him standing pointing a handgun at your car?
Correct.
What kind of handgun?
A snub-nosed revolver.
Ma'am, in the past, had you had any experience with handguns?
I would shoot regularly at the Beverly Hills Gun Club.
So you knew what a gun was, a handgun, a rifle, a shotgun?
I had shot probably every one of those.
And based on your experience, it was what kind of gun?
A snub-nosed revolver.
And could you tell us how he was pointing? Was he pointing at your car with both hands, one hand?
Both hands.
By the way, the measurement to the front of the table is actually 11 feet from the witness stand.
Thank you, Your Honor. What kind of car did you have?
I had a green Mercedes.
Well, when you walked outside, saw the defendant pointing a handgun at your green Mercedes, what did you do? What did you say, if anything?
I started screaming at him and screaming, "What the F do you think you're doing?"
Someone just teleported out of this courtroom. We're into it.
And did he respond to that? What did he say?
He kind of looked over his shoulder and screamed at me to get the F back in the house.
And the witnesses looked over her right shoulder.
And what happened next? What did you do?
Well, I was pretty angry. I was jumping around and screaming at him, and then he turned.
Go ahead.
He turned and started walking at me, screaming at me to get the F back in the house. And I stood my ground.
I think the question is...
No, actually, she said she stood her ground. The answer was...
How many times do you think you screamed at him? What are you doing? What are you doing?
Good morning, Dave.
3, 4, 5 times.
Yeah, I'm going to give out 5 memberships right now. Let's see who's lurking back there. Let's see who gets these things.
And how many times did he yell at you to get back into the house?
In answer to me, 3, 4, 5 times.
Now, when he turned and faced you, what was he doing, if anything, with the gun?
He was pointing the gun at me.
Right at you?
Yes.
At your face, at your head, or were you moving around?
I was jumping around.
Found Phil lurking back there, you son of a bitch. Tayo Toys just got membered up. Todd getting in here. Paige Miller. Dave just popping through also. Perfect timing. And Vine Crime, new name I haven't seen. Welcome the hell in here to being members of Publicly Buzzed. Keep your eyes open on cool shit. Welcome in here.
And as he's pointing the gun at you, he's telling you to get back into the house.
Oh, wait, the judge has something to say. The judge has something to say.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Yeah.
And is this in a loud voice, threatening voice? Can you characterize it for us at all?
Loud, threatening, yes.
What did you do after he said that to you?
I kept screaming at him, "What the F do you think you're doing?" And at that point, he took his right hand that was holding the revolver and smacked me in the side of the head and said, "I told you to get the F back in the house." At that point, I knew I was in trouble.
Where did he hit you?
The latter part of the answer at that point and from there to the finish is stricken. The jury's admonished to disregard it.
Thank you. What was your reaction? Were you afraid or not after he hit you?
I was terrified.
Where did he hit you on the head?
Right here.
All right, so you're pointing to the right side of your head, just above the ear of the temple, in the temple area?
Right in here.
That was an accurate description.
Thank you, Your Honor. And you said he hit you with his hand. Was that the hand that he'd been holding the gun in?
The gun was in his hand.
It was still in his hand. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did he hit you with the backside of his hand, or with the gun itself?
My vision is of the hand coming like that.
Like that, so he hit you with the back of his hand?
With the back of his hand, yeah.
Did you feel anything that felt like a gun, though, when it hit your head?
Something sharp hit my head.
And so then you said that you were frightened, you were terrorized. What did you do next?
I went back in the house.
And what did Phil Spector, what did the defendant do?
He went into the house, and I stood against the wall just to the left of the front door. And he sat on the stairwell, which was a couple of feet away.
What were you doing? Were you crying?
I was sobbing, and I said, "Why are you doing this, Phil? Why are you doing this?"
You'd known him at that point for how long?
A couple of years at least.
And you were crying and saying, "Why are you doing this?"
I was crying. I was terrified. I was saying, "Why are you doing this? What is this about? Why are you doing this?"
And did he say anything in response?
He said, "I was looking all over for you. Where have you been?"
When he said that to you, what was he doing with the gun?
The gun was pointed at me.
It was still pointed at you?
He was seated on the stairs with the gun pointed at me.
With both hands, as you just indicated?
Both hands.
And he's asking you where you went, or where were you?
Correct.
What did you say?
I said I was asleep on the couch.
And did he say anything?
He said, "No, you weren't. I looked in the living room. You weren't there."
And did you respond?
I was crying, and I said, "How could you have missed me? I'm wearing black and pink. It's a white couch. How could you have missed me? I was sleeping on the couch. You couldn't have missed me, Phil."
You were wearing the bright pink sweater or
Fuchsia
jacket?
pink jacket.
And when you said that to him, what did he say?
He kept screaming at me that he'd been looking for me. He wanted to know where I was, that I was snooping for things to sell, that I was stealing things. He'd had some, well, that's hearsay, so I won't say it.
I'm sorry.
Never mind. But I kept saying,
sounds,
I was wearing
clearly
a
unhinged.
very tight black dress. It was a very, very short. And I said, look at my pockets, like, you know.
Hey,
And,
Bobby,
and
walk
he had
on
my
in.
hand purse,
Come through here this morning.
my handbag, and he said, I'm going to find what you took.
Now, while you're there crying and he's sitting there pointing the gun at you, he's asking you if you were stealing souvenirs?
Yes, he always thought people were trying to sell things with his name.
The portion of the answer, yes, he always thought, is stricken. The jury's admonished.
Did he accuse you of stealing souvenirs from his house?
He just said stealing.
Yes.
Excuse me, I'm going to object. Questions are becoming leading and suggestive. Becoming leading and
It's
suggestive.
based on a previous answer. The objection is overruled. You may proceed.
He treats women in his life like, someone has to hire a maid or something, and they're like really old. Usually they have some kind of like mental health issues, actually, like, some kind of schizophrenia or something's going on, Alzheimer's, whatever. And they think that this person that's coming in here cleaning my house, they're stealing all my stuff. This is this guy with just women that he's dating. You've been stealing my stuff. Are you selling my John Lennon autographs?
Did he accuse you of stealing souvenirs from his house as pointing the gun at you?
He didn't say the word souvenirs. He referenced that people sold things with his name.
Did you take it to be memorabilia or souvenirs?
At that point,
The objection is sustained.
I think in an earlier answer, correct me if I'm wrong, you said at this point he had your handbag.
he did.
What happened then?
He told me to take my clothes off and to go up to the third floor.
Take your clothes off?
Yes.
Was he pointing the gun at you when he
Yes,
said
he
this?
was.
What was your reaction to this?
I was crying. I said, Phil, don't make me do this. I don't want to do this. Why are you doing this? I was sobbing. I was terrified.
Did he ask you again or not?
He said it numerous times.
Numerous times?
Yes.
And what was he doing with the gun as he asked you numerous times to take off your clothes and was this the first floor?
He was sitting on the stairs and pointing the gun at me.
What did you eventually do?
Eventually, he got up and he backhanded me with the pistol again and said,
Son
I
of a
told you to
bitch.
take your effing clothes off.
And describe for the jurors how he hit you again.
It was virtually the same. It was in the back of the hand and it was a little lower than the first.
On the right side of your head near the temple?
Correct.
With the hand that he was holding the gun in?
Correct.
What did you do then?
Then I hit real terror and I took off my jacket and threw it to him. He went back to the stairs. I threw it to him on the stairs.
Then what happened?
Then he started going through my handbag.
While you were still sitting there?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And
Excuse me, was that a yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm so sorry.
You may proceed.
So you're sitting there, he's holding your handbag and going through it?
Correct.
What is he doing with the gun as he's going through your handbag?
The gun was in his hand, but not always pointed at me. It would, he would pull things out, and he pulled out my wallet. He pulled out my house keys. Then he pulled out a lipstick and said, "What is this?" And I said, "It's a lipstick." Lipstick. It's a lipstick. I don't know what he thought I had in a lipstick.
The portion of the answer concerning whether he didn't, actually I've lost the train, but that small portion is excised. The objection is sustained. The jury is admonished.
You explained to him what he pulled out of your handbag.
It was a lipstick.
At that time, you told us earlier that you were crying through this after you'd been hit. Were you still crying then?
I didn't stop crying.
After he pulled out the lipstick and you said, "Phil, it's a lipstick," words to that effect?
Correct.
Is that correct? What happened then?
The same exchanges went back and forth, and then at some point he said, "Get the F out of here."
Before he said that, before he told you to get the F out of here, did he make any more demands at gunpoint or not to have you take off your clothes? Or get
It was the same.
I can't unsee him sitting in her lap now.
Just take off your clothes,
It
go
looks just like it.
upstairs. Where were you? I was
Jesus
looking for you. It
Christ.
was the same words over and over.
After that, when he told you to get the F out of here, what did you do?
I said
Love you,
I need
Donna.
my keys.
Where were your keys?
My keys were in the jacket pocket.
And that's the jacket that you took off at his direction
Correct.
and threw to him.
Correct.
What happened then?
I said, I need my jacket. The keys are in the pocket, and he threw the jacket at me. And I grabbed the keys, and I ran out the door.
To your car?
To my car.
What happened then? What did you do?
I got in the car, I went down the driveway, and I got to the gate, which is a gate with a heavy black tarp over it, and it swings in. And I thought it would be like you break a beam and the gate opens, but the gate didn't move. And I had a car phone. It was in the days of the car phone, and I was afraid, because Phil always referenced cameras, I was afraid I was on camera. And I didn't want him to see me calling the police.
Excuse me, objections. Completely non-responsive.
No, it is responsive, and it's explaining her train of thought and what she was doing in the objection.
Please continue.
So I didn't call the police for that reason, and I was sitting there crying. I didn't know what I was going to do, and then I heard footsteps come running down the driveway.
Narrative answer.
I don't believe that length of answer was a narrative. The objection is overruled. It will stand.
Thank you, Your Honor. So as you're sitting in your car at the gate that didn't open, correct?
Correct.
You heard footsteps.
I did.
What did you do? Did you look?
I looked in my side view mirror, and I saw Phil coming down the driveway, and then I heard the pump of a shotgun.
Again, you told us earlier in our conversation that you'd been at the Beverly Hills Gun Club and that you knew...
He's setting a preface for a question, and the objection is overruled.
Thank you. And you were familiar with guns, correct?
That's correct.
Do you ever handle or were you familiar with shotguns?
I had shot shotguns in the past. I did one for a television show as a demonstration.
So the sound of the pump action of a shotgun was not unfamiliar?
Happy Mother's Day.
It was not
Bobby.
unfamiliar.
I should have said it was just familiar, but okay. So you heard the pump action of a shotgun from the direction that Phil Spector was coming from. What did you do next?
He was screaming, I told you to get the F out of here. And I was screaming and crying, the gate won't open, the gate won't open. And Phil stopped in that split second. He went, gate didn't open? And I said, oh, the gate didn't open, the gate didn't open. And he said, okay, well, I'm going to go open the gate. And then you better get the F out of here. So no problem. Gate opened, I was gone.
I take it from your last answer that at this point, even in the car, while you're waiting for the gate to open, you were still upset and crying.
I was terrified.
So the gate opened. What did you do next? Where'd you go?
I drove a few blocks away and called 911
On your car phone?
on my car phone.
And when you called 911, did you eventually get a police agency?
I did.
The cops are like, that's just Phil. Get to the house, lady. Get to the fucking house. Why are you messing with Phil Spector? Good Lord.
Pasadena Police?
Pasadena Police.
That's what
And
cops said.
what request or what did you say to him?
I told them that I just had an incident in a home and I needed to see the police.
And after that, what did you do?
I waited. They asked me where I was. I gave them the address and the street where I was parked, and they came and they met me there.
How many police officers?
2.
Were they in uniform?
They were in uniform.
And did you see whether or not they were in a marked vehicle?
They were in a police car, a marked police car.
Now, since you've been here in this courthouse today, have you seen a man that is a police officer that looks like one of the men that met you?
I did.
I don't know if he's here in the courtroom, but you did see him.
I did.
Okay. Do you remember his name?
Russ.
Okay. Thank you. So a couple uniformed police officers met you on the street. What happened next?
I told them what had happened. I showed them the side of my head, which I had not seen yet. I could just feel the welts there, and there was a little bit of blood on one of them. And I said that he had kept my handbag, and I needed my handbag, that I was a high-profile person. He was a high-profile person, and I managed a high-profile person. and I really needed my handbag because that person's passport was in there, my passport, and otherwise I wanted to file assault and theft charges.
Did you also have some money in your handbag?
I had over $2,000.
And your other ID?
All my credit cards and house keys.
And what, if anything, did the police officers suggest to you or say to you?
They had me follow them back to the Pasadena Police Department and wait there. Somebody got some ice for my head. They said, we will go, we will get the handbag, we will be back. I made it very clear that I did not want to press charges.
Thank you. Objection is sustained. As to the portion of the answer, I made it very clear that portion is stricken and the jury is admonished.
Well, earlier you told the 2 uniformed officers that came up to you that you needed your handbag back.
I did.
So you got to the police department, somebody got you some ice for your head?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Said yes? And you waited.
She didn't want to press charges.
And your understanding was you were waiting for the police to go to the defendant's house, Phil Spector's house, and try to retrieve that handbag.
Correct.
Did there come a time when the same police officers came back to the police department there in Pasadena and met you for a second time?
Yes, they came back.
Excuse me, objection.
Sometimes yes, although...
I'm glad he dressed down this time instead of yesterday. It would have been in the trial.
It is responsive. And
maybe I shouldn't wear the purple.
Question, so the objection is overruled. You may finish your answer.
I'm going to be too loud.
What happened then?
They didn't have my handbag.
Give me my Beatles wig.
They didn't have my handbag in tow. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And at that point, when you learned that the police officers who you thought went to Phil Spector's house didn't have your handbag, was there some more conversation?
I said, where's my handbag? And they proceeded to tell me.
Excuse me, objection to what they said.
It won't be received for the truth of the matter, certainly, but it sounds like it's going to explain certain things that took place, so the jury is admonished and they understand how to treat it.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes. Please continue.
The police
Thanks,
came
Jan.
back
Welcome
and
in
said
here.
that Phil told them I had taken the handbag with
Excuse
me.
me, it's double hearsay now.
Again, even though it is double here, it is explaining her conduct. Well, all of these comments, ladies and gentlemen, are not being admitted for the truth. They're to explain what the witness did after hearing the comments. With that in mind, you may proceed.
Thank you. And you can finish your answer if you recall.
They said Phil told them that we had these lover spats all the time, that I always called the police, and this was my MO. And then they proceeded to tell me about the house and John Lennon's guitar and such. And I said, that's it, we're going back. I'm pressing charges.
And did you, in fact, after this conversation you've just told us about, go back to Phil Spector's house?
Correct.
Did you go?
If I interrupt, the objection that was made earlier, the comments that were made to the witness are admitted solely for the purpose of explaining what she just said, that based on what she heard, she said, we're going back, I'm going to press charges. It explains her state of mind and what she was about to do. It's received only for that purpose. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did you return to the defendant's house alone after this conversation, or did you go with somebody else?
Why is he titty flexing? Anybody else catch that? John Gotti?
In your car?
In my own car.
Lawyer?
You followed the police car?
Correct.
Flexing his titty.
What happened when you got there?
The gate was open about 2 feet, and we went up, and they went to the back door, which turned out to be the kitchen door.
Let me ask you this. When you arrived at the defendant's house with the police officers, did you exit your car and walk up near the house with them?
I walked with them.
And there were 2 of them?
Yes, there were.
Then tell us what happened
Jan,
then.
thank you so much. That's awesome.
We
Appreciate
walked
that.
up to what turned out to be the kitchen door. The windows were open. The
If
door
you're a
was
mother,
open.
happy
There was
Mother's Day.
An outer door like a screen
Even if you're
door.
not, treat yourself.
You could hear Phil on the phone
Treat
talking to
yourself.
somebody, laughing and joking.
And then what happened?
The officers knocked on the door.
And then?
And Phil said, gentlemen, when I told you to come back any time, I didn't realize it was going to be so soon. Please, please come in. Phil is very charming.
Phil is very charming.
Very charming.
And in fact, during your relationship was often charming with you.
Oh, for sure.
After
Look at him.
the defendant expressed surprise at the
Charisma
police
spewing out
officer's
of him.
quick return, what happened next?
They told him that I was with them and that I wanted my handbag or I was pressing charges.
It's not being offered for truth of matter asserted, but to explain what took place after that, and the jury is so admonished. You may proceed.
And then what happened after that?
And then I heard him say, Miss Melvin is here? Please tell her to come in.
And did you?
I did not.
You stayed outside.
I stayed
They should have
outside.
busted through there like Stone Cold Steve Austin.
What did you hear or see next?
I heard the conversation that I wanted my handbag. He said she took it with her. She took it with her.
And you knew that wasn't true?
That was not true. And they said that I was going to be pressing charges if they did not come back out with the handbag. At that point, he started threatening them with lawsuits and trespassing and breaking and entering, and they exited the house immediately.
When you say he, who do you mean?
Phil.
The defendant, Phil Spector. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And from where you were, you could hear Phil Spector yelling this, you're trespassing or whatever it was?
I was right outside the door.
Okay. Was he speaking in the kind of tones that we're talking now, or was he yelling? Was he
No, he was yelling. I'm sorry. He was yelling.
Was he agitated, angry? You'd known him for a while.
He was very angry, and he went into I'm going to sue you mode.
Had you ever, well, I'll wait for later. Then you said the police officers exited the house.
Yes.
Did they come back to where you were?
They came out, and I was standing maybe a few inches from the door. I was right by the door. And they said he's now accused us of breaking and entering, and we have to call our sergeant.
And after they told that to you, where did you all go next?
We all walked down to the street where they called their sergeant. We waited for the sergeant.
And did there come a time shortly thereafter that another police officer, presumably a sergeant, showed up?
The sergeant did show up.
And after the sergeant showed up, did it appear there was a conversation between the police officers who'd been with you and the sergeant?
They had a conversation. They told the sergeant with me present what had transpired. And he said, we're going to take care of this right now. And all four of us went back up the hill.
Excuse me. The instruction from the court is only being received to explain why they went back to the house, which is where her answer ended, so the jury is admonished to consider it only for that purpose.
Thank you. So after the sergeant had the conversation with the two officers and you, did you all go back to the house?
The four of us went back together.
What happened then?
The sergeant and the two officers went inside. There were words, I could hear some scuffling, and then the next words I heard from Phil were, they're too tight, they're too tight. So I knew he was in handcuffs.
Putting the handcuffs on.
Did you later enter the home?
I then...
Daze him again!
Right then?
Yes.
Did you see the defendant, Phil Spector, at that time?
I saw him in handcuffs.
What happened then? Did he say anything to you? Did you say anything to him?
I said, Phil, where's my handbag?
And did he respond?
And he said, he was looking at me very intently, and he was going, you took it with you, Dorothy. You took it with you.
Okay, he was looking at me intently as stricken. The rest of the answer will remain.
So he was screaming at me, you took it with you. Don't you remember? Don't you remember? Dorothy, you took it with you. You took it with you. Don't you remember? And I said, Phil, I'm not leaving without my handbag, or you're being arrested for assault and for theft.
You knew you didn't have the handbag?
I knew he had.
Okay. Did there come a time when you saw your handbag?
One of the officers asked him if he could look around, and he said, yes, 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 it's not here. She took it with her. And then some, I don't think it was Officer Russ, I think it was the other officer, came walking in from the dining room saying, I found it under a table.
And it was your handbag?
It was my handbag.
Did you check to make sure the things that you were so concerned about were still inside?
I did, immediately.
And they were?
Everything was there.
What did you do next?
Thanks, dude. Appreciate that.
I really don't enjoy media and limelight, so I...
The objection is, Mr. Rosen, all you have to do is let me know. I can hear you.
Your Honor,
Mr.
talks
Rosen.
over my objections.
But you don't need to raise your voice. I can hear you. The objection is sustained. The answer that came in was stricken. You may re-ask a question.
Judge Bruce Willis.
You got your handbag back. Did you leave the property?
I left the property.
Earlier in our questions and answers here today, you told us, you told the court that a number of times you told the police officers who responded to this situation that you would want to press charges if you didn't get the handbag back?
Absolutely correct.
Because of the important documents in it?
Correct.
And if you got the handbag back, it was your intention not to press charges?
That's correct.
Why?
Because I didn't want it to become a National Enquirer cover.
You were concerned with your employer?
With my client and with myself.
You didn't want this to be all over the newspapers?
No.
And you got back what you wanted?
I did.
Now, and you also told us, in answers to my questions, the defendant hit you with his hand holding the gun twice. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you thought that there might be some blood on your head?
There was.
And you received some ice, some help at the police station. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you get any medical assistance for this?
No, there were small welts.
Okay.
I put some Neosporin on the one that was bleeding.
Okay. So you got back in your car, you left the defendant's property. Did you continue your weekend with your family or return back east?
I was out there for a week.
Okay. Could I have a moment, please, Your Honor?
Can I have a moment, counsel?
Yes.
Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, still moving. After this, you're going to want to be hanging out with Jessica for Justice. I think they just muted it. Over on Kick, I'm going to put her links right here in the chat. She watches Love After Lockup over on Kick, and it's a fun crew over there. Go check her out after this. And thanks everyone for hanging out today. Appreciate it.
Just one question. I just kind of need a yes or no on this. Following this incident, did you receive on a message machine or anything like that messages from the defendant, Phil Spector? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll revisit that perhaps later. Did you ever see Phil Spector after this?
I did.
Did you ever see the defendant, Phil Spector, again in a situation where you were alone with him?
Never.
Why?
I was frightened to be alone with him. I didn't know if he would turn again.
But you did with other people, you were in his company?
With other people, yes.
A few times?
2, 3, 4 times maybe, tops.
Again.
2 for sure. I'm thinking 3 or 4.
Pardon?
2 for certain. I'm thinking 3 or 4.
Just one more moment. All right.
All right. We'll take our 15-minute afternoon recess at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind the admonition will resume at 3 o'clock. The witness may step down. Thank you. 3 o'clock.
Wow. I can't believe how long the openings were. Finally got into some actual testimony here, and then we're still Dorothy Melvin, Part 2, under cross-examination. It's going to start us out next week. We have made it to video 7, ladies and gentlemen. Round of applause for everybody in here. I am compelled by this entire thing so far, though. I'm interested. I'm in. So I know it's going to be a long one, and I'm glad that it's an interesting one. It's sad as fuck. Stick with us because we do watch movies and such on Kick, and we'll probably watch some documentaries on this. We'll watch some films on this. I know there's a movie with Al Pacino who plays Phil Spector, and he wears a bunch of ridiculous wigs in it. It looks crazy, and I think it's about this trial, actually. And yeah, you're going to want to stay on board. And the lady that was murdered, Lana Clarkson, she appeared in tons of television shows and was a B-movie actress. And I'd seen a few of her movies, actually. And we're going to watch some of her movies also. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool avenues to kind of explore with this story outside of just the trial that I hope you hang out with Publicly Buzzed and do with us. So thanks, everyone. Again, it's the birthday here at Publicly Buzzed. I didn't even know that. That's fucking awesome. We're going to keep trucking here, baby. We're going to keep doing the damn thing. The next time you will see me will be Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be doing something. I know the Karen Reed trial is still rocking and rolling. And where you're going to be getting portaled today is going to be a new channel. It's a different channel. It is somebody that has sent their folks into us on occasion. Let me make sure I got it set up. Yeah. The channel is Excited Utterance. The lady's name is Hella. She's come in the chat here many times. She does a pretty cool job. Yeah. You'll get some different opinions on there. Once you get over there, give her a like. She has a stream today. She's streaming from Australia also, from the future. So 4 p.m. Eastern time. So yeah, go over there, hang out. About 4 p.m. Eastern time. I'm going to try to go in there also today and hang out. And yeah, but everyone today, thank you so much. Seriously, it's been an awesome freaking show. Craziness. And real quick, let me show a little bit of love. Real quick. I've been trying to do it at the end of shows so we don't mess up the flow, but all day long, here we go. This is where you're going right now. Jessica for Justice over on Kick. Link in the chat there. She's also got a YouTube channel where she's growing fast as fuck. She's closing in on 500 subs, which is where you want to hit. That's the first major milestone. Getting close to that. But yeah, Jessica 149. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Son of a bitch! Appreciate it. And then all new members that got gifted, thank you so much. All members saw yesterday, and Patreon folks got at least the knowledge of the new merchandise before anybody else did. So there are some perks to be looking out for. I'm going to get some new videos and stuff rocking and rolling as well. And then Mandy coming through and shut off the 11 months she's been rocking and rolling with me and Dan here, which is fucking awesome. Thank you for always modding and coming through. And again, part of the team here, she made the new merch, folks, which is fucking dope. I'm going to do a promo as we outro for that. If you haven't hit the like, please do so. Jen coming in and becoming a new member. Thank you, Jen, so much. And just to back that up, she said, you know what? I'm going to get $20 on top of it. Jen, coming the fuck through. Give me the loot. Give me the loot. Let's go. Welcome to the party. And the judge had to welcome you in as well. Love it, folks. Love it, folks. Yeah, I will see everybody probably in the chats tomorrow. Thank you guys so much. Jessica, yeah, always having bangers over there, right there. See you at 12:15 p.m. Yeah, Central Time. She's going to be hanging and banging. That's 1:15 Eastern. So that's not very long, folks. That's less than an hour. Go get your snacks. Get ready to rock and roll with Jessica. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. There, Carrie saying it right there. Hell yeah, about a church. All the mods. Brooklyn coming through here. Thank you so much for modding. Mandy coming through here. Thank you so much for modding. I love you guys so much. Pokemon, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers today. Go chill out. Don't do anything. Eat what you want. Watch what you want. Make the men, make your kids, the women kids, make your folks do the work. You don't need to be doing anything. Lounge around. I'm just rambling here. Okay. Yeah, unbronzed Aussie Laura. No, thank you for hanging and banging. Thank you for hanging and banging. Love it, love it, love it. And I think I'm going to go out with this. Yo, I'm going to put it in the chat one more time just because. Go buy yourself a new shirt. We got some cool shirts. We got some cool designs. We got a lot of cool merch on there. We got some Murder Church merch on there as well. But the new shirts by Mandy are dope as hell. I'm about to do the same, folks. Love you guys. And yeah, I'm going to end it with this promo. Love you. Have a great day. Happy Mother's Day.